What would you do if the past you buried came knocking at your door literally? Hey, folks, welcome back to the wild ride of Jenna, Nate, and a storm of secrets that just won't quit. Hit that subscribe button to stay locked in and drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? Let's dive into the chaos. It was one of those mornings in Fairmont, Pennsylvania, where the sky hung low and gray like a wet blanket slung over the town's sagging shoulders. Rosie's Diner sat on the corner of Main and Route 19, a squat brick box with a chipped red awning and a neon sign that buzzed open in fits and starts. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of frying hash browns, stale cigarette smoke that clung to the walls from decades past, and the sharp bite of coffee that had been sitting on the burner too long. The jukebox in the corner crooned a George Strait tune, check yes or no, all twang and nostalgia barely audible over the clatter of plates and the low rumble of voices swapping small-town gossip. Jenna Carter stood behind the counter, her sneakers planted firm on the worn linoleum, pouring a stream of black coffee into a chipped mug for Old Man Pete. Her apron hung loose over her faded jeans and a black t-shirt that had seen better days, the hem frayed from too many tugs. At 28, she carried the kind of tire that didn't wash off, etched into the lines around her hazel eyes and the way her shoulders slumped when she thought no one was looking. Her dark hair was yanked back in a ponytail, a few strands sticking to her sweaty neck from the breakfast rush that had hit like a freight train. "Here you go, Pete," she said, sliding the mug across the counter. Her voice was warm but clipped, the kind of tone you pick up after years of waiting tables for folks who tip in loose change. Pete, a wiry guy with a trucker cap and a face like cracked leather, grunted his thanks. "You're a saint, Jenna. Don't let nobody tell you different." She smirked, wiping her hands on a rag. "Yeah, well, sainthood don't pay the bills." He chuckled, a raspy sound that turned into a cough, and went back to his newspaper, yesterday's edition of the Fairmont Gazette, still folded to the obituaries. Jenna turned to check the clock above the pass-through window. 7:32 a.m. 3 hours into her shift, 6 more to go. Her back ached already, a dull throb from hauling trays and dodging spills, but she'd learned to ignore it. Rent was due Friday, and the landlord, Mr. Hensley, wasn't the forgiving type. She'd already pawned her mom's old silver necklace last month to cover Ellie's school supplies. Another late notice wasn't an option. Speaking of Ellie, there she was, tucked into the last booth by the window, her little world spread out on the scratched-up table. Jenna's 5-year-old daughter had her coloring book open, a rainbow of crayons scattered around her like confetti. Her chestnut curls bounced as she hummed to herself, swinging her legs under the seat, too short to touch the floor. In her lap sat her bunny buns. She called it a ragged thing with one droopy ear and stuffing poking out where she'd loved it half to death. Jenna's heart did that funny twist it always did when she looked at her kid. Half pride, half guilt. Ellie shouldn't be here, stuck at Rosie's with a peanut butter sandwich for breakfast, but Mrs. Kowalski had called at 6 a.m. with a hacking cough, and daycare wasn't in the budget this week. "Mommy, can I have more juice?" Ellie called, her voice cutting through the diner's din like a ray of sunshine. "In a sec, baby," Jenna replied, grabbing a pitcher of OJ from the counter. She weaved past Lucy, her best friend, and the only other waitress crazy enough to stick with this gig, who was balancing a stack of pancakes and a coffee pot like a circus act. "Girl, you're a machine," Lucy said, flashing a grin as she hustled by. Her blonde hair was tied up in a high pony, and her pink lipstick was somehow still perfect despite the chaos. "But heads up, new guy at 5's got money written all over him. Bet he's lost." Jenna raised an eyebrow, peering over at table 5. Sure enough, there he was, a guy who looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine ad for suits or cologne or something equally unattainable. Tall, maybe 6'2", with broad shoulders filling out a charcoal gray jacket that screamed custom tailored. His dark hair was combed just so, and a silver watch peeked out from his cuff, catching the light every time he moved. He was flipping through a leather notebook, pen in hand, scribbling something with the kind of focus that made you wonder what million-dollar deal he was sealing. In Fairmont, where most folks wore Carhartt jackets and drove pickups with rust holes, he was a fish out of water, a shark, maybe in a pond full of minnows. "Lost or slumming?" Jenna muttered, pouring Ellie's juice into a plastic cup with a lid. She handed it over, brushing a curl from her daughter's forehead. "Here you go, kiddo. Don't spill, okay?" Ellie nodded, slurping happily, then went back to her crayons. Jenna straightened, smoothing her apron, and grabbed her notepad. Time to face the shark. She crossed the diner, sidestepping a puddle of syrup some kid had left on the floor, and stopped at table 5. Up close, he was even more striking, clean-shaven, with gray eyes that flicked up to meet hers, sharp and steady. A faint whiff of something expensive hit her cedarwood. Maybe, or leather. Definitely not the Old Spice most guys around here splashed on. Morning, she said, pen poised over her pad. Welcome to Rosie's. What can I get you? He closed his notebook, setting it aside, and leaned back in the booth. His voice came out low, smooth as gravel on a back road. Just a water, thanks. And maybe some coffee black. Water and black coffee. Got it, she said, jotting it down. She flashed her standard smile, the one that said I'm friendly but don't expect me to chat, and turned to go. But as she walked away, she felt his eyes on her, a prickle running up her spine. Not creepy, just curious, like he was sizing her up, or maybe the whole damn diner. She shook it off, chalking it up to her imagination. Guys like him didn't stick around Fairmont, they breezed through, paid with crisp 20s, and vanished. Back at the counter, she filled a glass with ice and water, the cubes clinking loud in the quiet lull between orders. Lucy sidled up again, nudging her with a hip. So, what's he like? Bet he's one of them Pittsburgh CEOs. Slum in it for kicks. Dunno, Jenna said, keeping her voice low. Didn't say much. Probably just passing through. Too bad, Lucy sighed, dramatic as ever. Could have been your ticket outta here. Him, Ellie fancy house with a picket fence. Jenna rolled her eyes. Yeah, 'cause that's how it works. I serve him coffee, he sweeps me off to a mansion. Get real. Lucy laughed, loud enough to turn heads, and darted off to deliver a plate of biscuits and gravy. Jenna grabbed the coffee pot and Nate's water, heading back to table 5. She set them down with a quick here you go, ready to bolt, but Ellie's voice piped up again, bright and sudden. Mommy, I drew you something. Jenna glanced over, smiling despite herself. Hang on, sweetie, I'll be right there. She turned back to the guy Nate, though she didn't know it yet, and caught him watching Ellie. His head tilted slightly, like he was trying to figure something out. Kids. Huh? She said, half laughing, half apologizing. She's cute, he replied, his tone soft but genuine. Yours? Yeah, Jenna said, a flicker of pride cutting through her exhaustion. She's my whole world. He nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips, and she left it at that, hustling back to Ellie. Her daughter held up a picture, a stick-figure family under a big purple sun. All goofy smiles and wonky lines. That's you, me, and Buns, Ellie said, pointing at the bunny in the drawing. Love it, Jenna said, kissing her cheek. You're getting good at this. Ellie beamed, then frowned, tugging at Jenna's apron. Mommy, I'm hungry. All right, Jenna sighed, digging into her pocket for the emergency granola bar she kept stashed. She unwrapped it, breaking it in half, but before she could hand it over, Ellie slid off the booth, her bunny clutched tight. Ellie, wait. Too late. Her daughter was off like a shot, weaving through the tables with that fearless bounce only kids have. Jenna's stomach dropped as she saw where Ellie was headed, straight for table 5. She lunged after her, hissing, Ellie, no. But the little girl got there first, stopping dead in front of the stranger. And then it happened. Ellie threw her arms around his leg, squeezing tight, and yelled, Daddy. The diner froze. Pete's mug clunked hard on the counter. Lucy's tray wobbled, a fork sliding off with a clatter. The jukebox hit a scratchy pause, George Strait's voice cutting out mid-note. Every head turned, eyes wide, mouths gaping. Jenna stumbled to a stop, her heart slamming against her ribs like it wanted out. The granola bar slipped from her hand, hitting the floor with a pathetic crinkle. The man Nate went rigid, his coffee mug halfway to his lips. He blinked down at Ellie, gray eyes flaring with shock, then confusion, then something softer Jenna couldn't place. Ellie grinned up at him, totally unbothered, and hugged harder. Daddy, you came back. Jenna's face went hot, a flush creeping up her neck as she rushed over, grabbing Ellie's shoulders. Ellie, let go now. He's not. She yanked her daughter back, stammering at Nate. "Oh my God. I'm so sorry. She doesn't know what she's doing. I swear." Nate set his mug down, slow and careful, like he was afraid to spook her. "Hey, it's all right," he said, his voice calm despite the madness. He slid out of the booth and crouched down, meeting Ellie eye to eye. "What's your name, kiddo?" "Ellie," she chirped, clutching her bunny. "Are you my daddy? You got a shiny watch like in my dreams." Jenna wanted to die. Right there, melt into the linoleum and disappear. "Ellie, stop," she whispered, her voice shaking. "He's not daddy, okay? I'm so sorry, sir. She's just..." But Nate didn't snap or shove her away. He just looked at Ellie, then up at Jenna, his gaze steady, searching. "Dreams, huh?" he said almost to himself. Then louder, "No harm done. Kids say wild stuff sometimes." "Jenna," Mr. Grayson's growl cut through from the kitchen, his bald head poking out. "What's the holdup?" "We got orders pillin' up." "On it," she shot back, her throat tight. She scooped Ellie up, the girl's sneakers dangling, and muttered one last sorry to Nate before hauling her back to the booth. "You can't run off like that," she scolded, plopping Ellie down. "He's not daddy. He's just some guy." Ellie frowned, hugging Buns tighter. "But he's nice, mommy. And he's got gray eyes like the man in my sleep." Jenna's breath hitched. She didn't have an answer for that, not one she could unpack with a diner full of gawkers and a shift to finish. "Just eat your bar and color," she said, softer now, brushing Ellie's curls back. She risked a glance at Nate. He was still watching them, his coffee untouched, that notebook open again but forgotten. The diner buzzed back to life, forks clinking, Lucy cracking a joke to Pete, but something had shifted. Jenna felt it in her bones, a tug she couldn't name. And as Nate's gray eyes met hers across the room, she wondered, just for a second, what the hell Ellie had seen in him that she hadn't. Hey y'all, if that little daddy moment got your heart racing, stick around to see where this crazy ride takes Jenna, Ellie, and the mystery man in the suit. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. What's your guess? Why'd Ellie pick him? Let's talk about it. The alarm clock screeched at 5 a.m. A cheap plastic thing Jenna had picked up at Walmart for $6 after the last one gave out. Its red numbers glared through the pre-dawn dark of her cramped apartment. A one-bedroom hole in the wall on the second floor of a brick building off Fairmont's Main Street. She groaned, slapping the snooze button with a hand still heavy from sleep, and rolled over on the lumpy futon that doubled as her bed. The springs creaked under her weight, a reminder of the $50 she'd forked over for it at a garage sale 2 years back. It wasn't much, but it beat sleeping on the floor. Outside, the low rumble of a semi-truck rattled the thin windows, the sound bleeding through the walls from Route 19 a block away. Fairmont wasn't a quiet town, not with the highway slicing through it like a lifeline, but it was home. Or at least the closest thing Jenna had to one since she'd packed up her life in Altoona 6 years ago. Pregnant and broke, chasing a fresh start after Ethan bailed. She rubbed her eyes, the grit of exhaustion clinging to her like dust, and forced herself upright. Another day, another shift at Rosie's. Another scramble to keep the lights on. The living room was a mess of survival. A thrift store coffee table littered with Ellie's crayons and half-finished drawings. A stack of overdue bills pinned under a chipped ceramic mug. And a TV that only got 3 channels if you jiggled the antenna just right. The kitchenette in the corner wasn't much better, a sink full of dishes she hadn't had time to tackle. A fridge humming loud enough to wake the dead. And a countertop cluttered with empty cereal boxes and a loaf of Wonder Bread starting to go stale. Jenna shuffled over, flicking on the single bulb above the stove. It buzzed to life, casting a weak yellow glow over the peeling linoleum. She filled a kettle with tap water, metallic tasting stuff that'd probably kill her one day, and set it on the burner, then grabbed the bread to slap together a peanut butter sandwich. It was Ellie's breakfast most mornings, quick and cheap, though Jenna always felt that pang of guilt when she handed it over. She'd grown up on her mom's fluffy pancakes, drowned in syrup, back when life was softer. Now, she was lucky if she could afford the off-brand peanut butter that stuck to the roof of your mouth. "Ellie, sweetie, time to get up," she called, her voice hoarse from sleep. She padded over to the corner where Ellie's tiny mattress sat. wedged between the futon and a wall plastered with her drawing suns, flowers, stick figures with wild purple hair. The little girl stirred, her chestnut curls a tangled halo around her face, clutching buns tight to her chest. Her bunny's one good eye, a black button, stared up at Jenna like it was judging her. "Mommy?" Ellie mumbled, blinking slow. "Is it school today?" "Nope. It's Tuesday," Jenna said, brushing a curl from Ellie's forehead. "You're coming with me to Rosie's. Mrs. Kowalski's still sick." Ellie sat up, rubbing her eyes with a fist. "Can I bring my crayons?" "Course you can," Jenna said, managing a smile. "Gotta keep my artist busy, right?" Ellie nodded, yawning big, and scrambled off the mattress. She toddled over to her backpack, a beat-up pink thing with a busted zipper Jenna had patched with duct tape, and started stuffing it with her coloring book, a handful of crayons, and buns. Jenna watched her, that familiar ache blooming in her chest. Ellie deserved better than this, a real bed, a room with toys instead of hand-me-downs, a mom who wasn't always running on fumes. But deserving and getting were two different things, and Jenna had learned that lesson the hard way. She turned back to the kitchen, pouring hot water into a chipped mug and stirring in a spoonful of instant coffee. The steam curled up, warming her face as she took a sip, bitter and thin, but it'd kick her awake. She glanced at the clock again. 5:20. They needed to be out the door by 5:45 to catch the early bus to Rosie's. No car since the old Chevy broke down last spring, and fixing it was a pipe dream with rent eating up every dime. "Mommy, why don't I have a daddy like Katie does?" Ellie's voice piped up, small but clear, as she tugged on a pair of mismatched socks, one blue, one with faded strawberries. Jenna froze, the mug halfway to her lips. That question again. It hit her like a sucker punch every time, dragging up memories she'd rather keep buried. Ethan's crooked grin, the way he'd promised her the moon when they were 19 and dumb, the empty apartment he'd left her in when she told him about the baby. She set the mug down, steadying her breath, and crouched to Ellie's level. "Some families are different, sweetie," she said, keeping her tone light. "Katie's got a daddy, sure, but we've got each other. And buns, right? That's our team." Ellie tilted her head, brown eyes searching Jenna's face. "But in my dreams, there's a daddy. He's tall and nice, and he's got gray eyes." Jenna's stomach twisted. Gray eyes. She thought of the guy from yesterday, the suit at table 5, the one Ellie had latched onto like he was some long-lost hero. Nate, his name turned out to be. According to the business card he'd left with a $20 tip, she still couldn't believe. Nate Sullivan, Sullivan Enterprises. She'd stared at it last night, turning it over in her hands, wondering what kind of man dropped that kind of cash in a dump like Rosie's. And now Ellie was dreaming about gray eyes? It was a coincidence, had to be. Kids dreamed up all kinds of crazy stuff. "Yeah, well, dreams are funny like that," Jenna said, forcing a smile. "Come on, let's get you dressed. Bus won't wait." Ellie nodded, dropping it for now, and let Jenna wrestle her into a pair of jeans and a hoodie with a unicorn on it, the hem frayed from too many washes. Jenna pulled on her own clothes, jeans, a faded Steelers t-shirt, and a denim jacket she'd had since high school. She laced up her sneakers, the soles worn thin, and grabbed her purse, stuffing in the sandwich, a water bottle and Nate's card. She didn't know why she kept it, maybe just to remind herself that yesterday had actually happened. They stepped out into the chilly morning, the stairwell of their building creaking underfoot. The air smelled like diesel and wet leaves, a faint mist hanging over Fairmont's tired streets. Jenna locked the door, the deadbolt sticking like always, and led Ellie down to the bus stop a block away. The sky was lightning, streaks of pink cutting through the gray, but the town still felt asleep. Shuttered storefronts, a stray cat darting across the road, the distant whine of a train hauling coal somewhere beyond the old steel mill. The bus rolled up at 5:50, a rattling beast with chipped yellow paint and a driver who barely glanced at them. Jenna swiped her pass, hoisting Ellie onto a seat near the front. The little girl pressed her nose to the window, watching the world blur by gas stations, a Dollar General, the rusted skeleton of the mill looming like a ghost of Fairmont's better days. Jenna sank into the seat beside her, sipping her coffee from a travel mug, her mind drifting despite the jolt of caffeine. She thought about Ethan again, unbidden. He'd been a mechanic back in Altoona, hands always stained with grease, a laugh that could fill a room. They'd met at a bonfire party, sparks flying over cheap beer and a starry sky. He'd called her babe, promised her a little house with a porch swing someday. But when she'd shown him the pregnancy test, his laugh had dried up fast. "I can't do this," he'd said, bag slung over his shoulder, and that was it. Gone by morning, no note, no goodbye. She'd cried for weeks, then packed up and ran to Fairmont, hoping distance would dull the hurt. It hadn't, not really, just turned it into a quiet scar she carried around. "Mommy, look." Ellie's voice snapped her back, pointing at a deer bounding across a field as the bus rattled past. "It's so fast." "Yeah, it sure is," Jenna said, mustering a grin. She squeezed Ellie's hand, grounding herself in the warmth of those little fingers. Ethan might have left, but Ellie was here, her reason to keep going, her light in the dark. The bus lurched to a stop a block from Rosie's at 6:10, the diner's neon sign flickering in the distance. Jenna helped Ellie down, her backpack bouncing as they trudged through the gravel lot. The air was colder now, biting at her cheeks, and she pulled her jacket tighter. Inside, the diner was already waking up, Darren banging pots in the kitchen, Lucy wiping down the counter, the first regulars trickling in for their coffee and eggs. "Morning, sunshine," Lucy called, tossing Jenna a rag. "You look like you got hit by a truck." "Feel like it too," Jenna shot back, tying on her apron. She set Ellie up in the corner booth with her sandwich and crayons, brushing a kiss across her forehead. "Be good, okay? Mommy's gotta work." Ellie nodded, already digging into her coloring book, and Jenna turned to face the day. Another shift, another hustle. But as she poured coffee for Pete and took an order for scrambled eggs, those gray eyes from yesterday lingered in her mind. Nate Sullivan. She didn't know why Ellie had picked him out of the crowd, or why his card was still burning a hole in her purse. All she knew was that something felt different today, like the air was holding its breath, waiting for whatever came next. The lunch rush at Rosie's diner hit like a freight train on Wednesday, the kind of chaos that made Jenna wonder why she hadn't quit years ago. By 11:30 a.m., every booth was packed, truckers scarfing down burgers, retirees nursing coffee, a couple of high school kids skipping class to split a plate of fries. The air buzzed with chatter, the sizzle of the grill, and the occasional clang of Darren dropping a spatula in the kitchen. Jenna darted between tables, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum, balancing a tray of meatloaf specials in one hand and a coffee pot in the other. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and her ponytail was slipping loose, but she kept moving. Rent was due in 2 days, and tips were her lifeline. Ellie sat in her usual corner booth, her coloring book spread out like a tiny island of calm amid the storm. She'd drawn a new picture, a lopsided house with a purple roof and a stick figure family out front, and was humming some made-up tune, her bunny buns propped up beside her like a VIP guest. Jenna flashed her a quick smile as she hustled by with a stack of dirty plates, but her mind was a treadmill of worry. $40 in tips so far. Need at least 60 to cover the late fee. Goddamn Hensley's gonna evict us one of these days. "Jenna, table 6 needs ketchup," Lucy hollered, zipping past with a tray of milkshakes. Her blonde ponytail bounced like it was immune to the heat, and somehow her apron stayed spotless. Jenna envied that her own was a map of ketchup stains and grease spots. On it, Jenna called back, snagging a bottle from the counter. She dropped it off at 6, a grizzled guy in a Steelers cap who barely grunted thanks, then swung by the coffee station to refill the pot. The diner smelled like fried onions and desperation, the kind of scent that stuck to your clothes long after you clocked out. She was mid-pour when the bell above the door jingled, a sharp little chime that cut through the noise. She didn't look up at first, too busy juggling orders, but Lucy's low whistle from across the room made her glance over. "Well, damn," Lucy muttered, nudging her. "Mr. Fancy Pants is back." Jenna's stomach did a weird flip. There he was, stepping through the door like he'd walked off a billboard. Nate Sullivan, the guy from yesterday, all sharp suit and quiet confidence. Same charcoal gray jacket, same silver watch glinting under the fluorescence, same gray eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He didn't belong here. Rosie's was chipped mugs and sticky tables, not polished leather and $1 million vibes, but there he was, scanning the room like he owned it. Guess he liked the coffee, Jenna said, trying to sound casual, but her pulse kicked up a notch. She hadn't stopped thinking about him since Ellie's little stunt, those gray eyes. That $20 tip. The way he'd crouched down to talk to her kid like it was no big deal. She'd tucked his card in her purse, half tempted to toss it, half curious about what Sullivan Enterprises even meant. And now here he was again, like some kind of cosmic joke. He caught her eye and nodded a small, polite tilt of his head, then made his way to table 5, same spot as before. The high school kids at table 4 gawked, whispering behind their hands, probably wondering if he was some Pittsburgh hotshot slumming it in Fairmont. Jenna smoothed her apron, suddenly hyper-aware of the coffee stain on her sleeve, and grabbed her notepad. No point stalling, he was her table, fair and square. "Hey, welcome back," she said as she approached, keeping her tone light. "Water and black coffee again?" Nate looked up from his phone, setting it face down on the table. Up close, he was even more unreal, clean-shaven. A faint scar above his eyebrow she hadn't noticed yesterday, and that cologne again. Something woodsy that made her think of pine forests she'd never seen. "Yeah, that sounds good," he said, his voice low and steady. "But maybe throw in a cheeseburger too. Been a long morning." "Cheeseburger it is," she said, scribbling it down. "Fries okay with that?" "Perfect," he replied. And there it was, that small smile, just enough to soften the edges of his face. "How's your day going so far?" She blinked, caught off guard. Customers didn't ask her that, not the regulars, not the truckers, not even Lucy half the time. Busy," she said, tucking a stray hair behind her ear. "Same old, you know." "You?" "Busy too," he said, leaning back in the booth. "Meetings in Pittsburgh ran late. Thought I'd stop in before heading back." "Pittsburgh? Huh?" she said, raising an eyebrow. "What brings you to Fairmont, then?" "We're not exactly on the way." He shrugged, a casual roll of his shoulders. "Got a project up near Uniontown. Figured I'd take the scenic route." "Scenic?" she snorted, glancing out the window at the gray sprawl of Main Street, empty storefronts, a rusted pickup, and a stray dog sniffing a trash can. "Yeah, real postcard material." He chuckled, a low sound that sent a weird flutter through her chest. "It's got its charm," he said, and his eyes flicked toward Ellie's booth for a split second before landing back on her. "Your girl keeping you on your toes?" Jenna's smile faltered, yesterday's embarrassment creeping back. "Always," she said, forcing a laugh. "She's got a big imagination. Sorry again about that whole thing." "Don't be," he said, waving it off. "Made my day, honestly. She's a sweetheart." "Yeah, she is," Jenna said, softening. She glanced over at Ellie, who was now coloring a giant flower, oblivious to the world. "She's the best thing I've got." "I can see that," Nate said, and there was something in his tone, warm, real, that made her pause. Before she could figure it out, he added, "What's her name?" "Ellie," she said, pride sneaking into her voice. "Short for Eleanor, but she hates that." "Ellie," he repeated like he was testing it out. "Suits her." Jenna nodded, unsure what to say next. She wasn't used to this customers chatting her up like they cared, especially not guys like him. "Well, I'll get your order in," she said, stepping back. "Won't be long." "Thanks, Jenna," he said, and she froze mid-turn. He'd remembered her name, probably from her tag. Sure, but it still threw her. She gave a quick nod and bolted for the kitchen, her cheeks inexplicably warm. "Darren, cheeseburger with fries," she called through the pass-through, setting the ticket on the spinning rack. The cook grunted, flipping a patty with a scowl, and she grabbed Nate's water and coffee from the counter. Lucy swooped in as she poured, leaning close with a grin. "So he's back for you, huh?" she teased, popping a stick of gum. "Told ya he's into you." "Shut up," Jenna muttered, rolling her eyes. "He's just hungry." Lucy said, smirking. "Hungry for a side of Jenna Carter. Bet he's got a penthouse with your name on it." "You're ridiculous," Jenna said, but she couldn't help a small laugh as she headed back to Nate's table. She set the drinks down, careful not to spill. "Food's coming. Anything else you need?" "Nah, I'm good," he said, wrapping a hand around the coffee mug. "Thanks, though." She nodded and turned away, but Ellie's voice piped up before she got 2 steps. "Mommy, look what I made." She held up her drawing. The flower now had a little stick figure girl next to it, holding a bunny. That's awesome, sweetie, Jenna said, crossing over to her. You're getting better every day. Ellie beamed, then glanced past her at Nate. Her eyes lit up, and Jenna's heart sank. Mommy, it's the nice man again, she said, loud enough for half the diner to hear. Jenna spun around, praying Nate hadn't caught it, but he had his head tilted, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Hey Ellie, he called, giving her a little wave. That's a cool flower. Thanks, Ellie chirped, hopping off the booth. Before Jenna could grab her, she scampered over to Nate, clutching her drawing like a prize. I made it for you, Ellie. Jenna started, rushing after her. But Nate was already taking the paper, holding it up like it was a masterpiece. For me? He said, eyebrows lifting. Well, I'm honored. This is going right on my fridge. Ellie giggled, bouncing on her toes, and Jenna hovered behind her, mortified but oddly touched. You don't have to keep it, she said, reaching for Ellie's hand. She's just, I want to. Nate cut in, his tone firm but kind. He set the drawing next to his phone, smoothing it flat. Thanks, Ellie. You're a real artist. Ellie grinned, then tugged at Jenna's apron. Mommy, can he come draw with me? Jenna's mouth went dry. Oh honey, he's busy eating, she said, shooting Nate an apologetic look. We don't want to bug him. But Nate leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. I've got a minute, he said, glancing at Jenna. If that's okay with you. She blinked, thrown. Sure, she said, her voice barely steady. If you want. Deal, he said, sliding out of the booth. He grabbed his coffee and followed Ellie back to her spot, settling in across from her like it was the most natural thing in the world. Jenna stood there, rooted, watching as Ellie handed him a crayon purple, of course, and started babbling about her picture. See, this is me, and this is Buns, Ellie said, pointing at the bunny. You can draw a dog if you want. A dog? Huh? Nate said, sketching a wobbly shape that barely passed for a puppy. How's that? Ellie laughed, clapping her hands. It's funny. Jenna's chest tightened, a mix of embarrassment and something softer she couldn't name. Nate didn't have to do this play along, act like Ellie's scribbles mattered, but he was, and it was messing with her head. She snapped out of it when Darren bellowed, "Cheeseburger up," from the kitchen, and she hurried to grab it, her hands shaky as she set the plate in front of Nate. Here you go, she said, avoiding his eyes. Hope it's good. Looks perfect, he said, setting the crayon down. Thanks, Jenna. She nodded, retreating to the counter as he dug in, chatting with Ellie between bites. Lucy sidled up again, smirking like the cat that got the cream. Told ya, she whispered. He's hooked. Shut it, Jenna hissed, but her gaze kept drifting back to them. Nate laughing at Ellie's dog critique. Ellie glowing like she'd won the lottery. It was sweet, sure, but it stirred up questions she didn't want to ask. Why was he here again? Why was he so damn nice? And why did Ellie keep picking him out of every stranger who walked through that door? By the time Nate finished, the rush had slowed, leaving the diner half empty. He slid a 20 and his business card under the plate, same as yesterday. Nate Sullivan, Sullivan Enterprises, and stood, brushing crumbs off his jacket. Thanks for the burger, he said, catching her eye. And the art lesson. Anytime, she said, her throat tight. See ya. He nodded, gave Ellie a little wave, and headed out, the bell jingling behind him. Jenna stared at the card, then at Ellie, who was back to coloring like nothing had happened. But something had happened, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the last they'd see of Nate Sullivan. Hey y'all, how wild was that? Nate's back and Ellie's stealing the show. If you're dying to know what's up with this guy, and why he's so into them, smash that subscribe button and drop a comment. What's your take? Coincidence or something more? Let's hear it. The Thursday afternoon sun hung low over Fairmont, painting the sky a dull orange as Jenna pushed Ellie's stroller down the cracked sidewalk toward Miller Park. It was one of those rare days off from Rosie's. Mr. Grayson had cut her shift to save a buck, leaving her with a free afternoon and a restless 5-year-old. She'd scraped together enough change for a couple popsicles from the gas station, figuring a little fresh air might shake off the buzz in her head. Nate Sullivan had been popping into her thoughts like a song. She couldn't unstick those gray eyes. That easy laugh. The way he doodled with Ellie like it was nothing. She'd tucked his card in her wallet, telling herself it was just curiosity, but it felt heavier than that. Miller Park wasn't much a patchy stretch of grass with a rusty slide, a set of swings that squeaked like they were begging to retire, and a splintered picnic table where old guys played checkers on weekends. But Ellie loved it, her sneakers kicking up dust as she bolted from the stroller the second Jenna unbuckled her. "Mommy, push me," she squealed, clambering onto a swing, her bunny buns clutched tight in one hand. "All right, hold on," Jenna said, forcing a grin as she set the stroller aside. She gave Ellie a gentle shove, the chains groaning with each arc, and watched her daughter's curls bounce in the breeze. For a minute, it was perfect, just the two of them, the world small and simple. No late rent notices, no diner chaos, no strangers with fancy suits stirring up feelings she didn't have time for. "Faster, Mommy," Ellie giggled, kicking her legs, and Jenna obliged, her arms aching but her heart light. The park was quiet today, just a jogger in the distance and a scruffy mutt sniffing around the trash cans. She let her mind drift, replaying Nate's visit yesterday, the cheeseburger, the 20, the way he'd said thanks, Jenna, like it meant something. Maybe Lucy was right, maybe he was into her. But that was crazy. Guys like him didn't chase single moms from nowhere towns. Did they? Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her back. She slowed the swing, fishing it out with one hand, a beat-up flip phone she'd had since Ellie was a baby. The screen cracked but still kicking. Probably Lucy, texting some dumb joke about Mr. Grayson's mustache. She flipped it open, expecting a laugh, but the message stopped her cold. "Stay away from Sullivan or you'll regret it." No name, no number, just a blocked sender. The words stark against the dim screen. Her stomach dropped, a sick twist like she'd swallowed something sour. She read it again, her thumb hovering over the keys, but the swing creaked, and Ellie's voice broke through. "Mommy, why'd you stop?" Jenna snapped the phone shut, shoving it back in her pocket. "Sorry, sweetie," she said, her voice tighter than she meant. "Just checking something. Wanna go higher?" "Yeah," Ellie chirped, oblivious, and Jenna pushed again, harder this time, her mind racing. Stay away from Sullivan. Nate? It had to be him. How many Sullivans did she even know? But why? Who'd care that he'd eaten a burger at Rosie's twice? Her pulse thudded, loud in her ears, and she scanned the park, half expecting someone to step out from behind the slide with a megaphone and a grudge. The jogger was gone now, the mutt trotting off toward Main Street. Nothing weird, nothing off, just a sleepy afternoon in Fairmont. But her gut wouldn't settle. She'd lived here 6 years, kept her head down, never stepped on toes. The worst trouble she'd had was a drunk trucker grabbing her arm once at the diner, and Darren had tossed him out before it got ugly. This was different, cold, deliberate, like a shadow creeping up behind her. "Mommy, look," Ellie shouted, pointing at a squirrel darting up a tree, and Jenna forced a smile, her hands shaky on the swing. "Cool. Huh?" she said, but her eyes darted back to the empty benches, the chain link fence, the dirt path winding out of sight. She pulled the phone out again, rereading the text, her breath shallow. Regret it. Regret what? Hurting her? Ellie? Her shitty apartment wasn't worth robbing, and she didn't have enemies unless you counted Ethan, but he'd vanished years ago, probably drinking himself stupid in some dive bar by now. "Time to head home, sweetie," she said abruptly, slowing the swing to a stop. Ellie pouted, her little brow furrowing. "But I want to slide," she whined, gripping buns tighter. "We'll come back tomorrow," Jenna said, already unbuckling the stroller. "Mommy's tired, okay?" It wasn't a lie, her legs felt like jelly, her chest tight with a panic she couldn't shake. Ellie grumbled but climbed in, hugging her bunny as Jenna strapped her down and started pushing. The walk back felt longer, every rustle in the bushes making her flinch, every parked car a potential threat. That text wasn't a prank, it was a warning, and it had Nate's name all over it. By the time they reached their building, a squat, brick relic with peeling paint and a busted buzzer, Jenna's nerves were shot. She hauled the stroller up the stairs, the wheels thumping against each step, and fumbled with her keys, her hands slick with sweat. Inside, the apartment smelled like stale coffee and the lavender candle she'd burned last week to mask it. She locked the door, slid the deadbolt, and checked it twice, her breath ragged. "Mommy, can I watch cartoons?" Ellie asked, kicking off her sneakers and padding to the futon. "Yeah, go ahead," Jenna said, flipping on the TV. The fuzzy glow of some cartoon about singing vegetables filled the room, and Ellie settled in, giggling at a dancing carrot. Jenna sank onto the futon beside her, pulling her phone out again. She stared at the text, the words blurring as her thoughts spun. "Stay away from Sullivan." She barely knew the guy. 2 meals, a couple chats, a kid's drawing. How did that piss someone off enough to threaten her? She grabbed Nate's card from her purse, running her thumb over the embossed Sullivan Enterprises. Maybe he wasn't just some rich guy passing through. Maybe he had enemies, big ones, the kind who'd stalk a waitress and her kid to prove a point. Her stomach churned. She'd seen movies like that, mob bosses, shady deals, innocent people caught in the crossfire. But this was Fairmont, not some gritty crime flick. Right? The phone buzzed again, and she nearly dropped it, her heart slamming against her ribs. Another message, same blocked number, "We're watching." Attached was a grainy photo, her and Ellie at the park, taken from behind, Ellie mid-swing. The popsicle dripped in her hand, the stroller parked beside her. Jenna's breath stopped, a cold sweat prickling her skin. Someone had been there, close enough to snap this, close enough to grab them if they'd wanted. "Mommy, what's wrong?" Ellie asked, her big brown eyes flicking up from the TV. "You look scared." Jenna forced a smile, tucking the phone against her chest. "Nothing, sweetie," she lied, her voice thin. "Just thinking about work. Want to help me make mac and cheese?" Ellie nodded, hopping up, and Jenna followed her to the kitchenette, her legs wobbly. She dumped a pot of water on the stove, her hands trembling as she ripped open the craft box. Ellie chattered about the cartoon, oblivious, but Jenna's eyes kept darting to the window curtains half open, the street below dimming as dusk crept in. "We're watching." Who? Why? And how the hell did Nate fit into this? She stirred the noodles, the steam fogging her face, and tried to think. Call the cops? They'd laugh. 2 texts and a blurry pic weren't exactly a smoking gun. Tell Lucy? She'd freak, probably drag Jenna to her cousin's trailer in Ohio to hide. Nate? She didn't even have his number, just that damn card, mocking her from the counter. But he'd been nice, too nice, maybe. What if he wasn't the good guy here? What if he'd dragged her into something dark without even blinking? The water boiled over, hissing on the burner, and she snapped it off, her hands shaking. "Dinner's almost ready," she said, plating the neon orange mess for Ellie. Her daughter dug in, humming happily, but Jenna couldn't eat. Her stomach was a knot, her mind a mess of what-ifs. She grabbed the phone again, staring at the photo, the timestamp glaring back. 4:47 p.m., less than an hour ago. She locked the door again, checked the windows, and pulled the curtains tight, the apartment shrinking around her. Ellie yawned, curling up on the futon with buns, and Jenna tucked a blanket over her, brushing a kiss on her forehead. "Sleep tight, baby," she whispered, but her eyes stayed on that card. Nate's name, a question she couldn't answer. Whoever was watching, they knew her, knew Ellie, and they wanted her away from Nate Sullivan. The why was a black hole, sucking her in, and as the cartoon jingle faded to static, Jenna realized she wasn't just scared. She was trapped. Jenna barely slept that night, her eyes glued to the ceiling as the apartment creaked and groaned around her. Ellie snored softly on the futon, buns tucked under her chin, but every shadow flickering through the curtains made Jenna's heart lurch. The phone sat on the coffee table like a loaded gun. Those texts, that photo, replaying in her head like a horror movie she couldn't shut off. "Stay away from Sullivan or you'll regret it. We're watching." She checked the locks 3 times, wedged a chair under the doorknob, and still felt like a sitting duck. By the time the first gray light seeped through the blinds, she was a wreck, bags under her eyes, nerves frayed to threads. "Mommy, you look tired," Ellie said over breakfast, a bowl of Cheerios swimming in the last of the milk. She tilted her head, brown eyes wide with that kid worry that cut deep. Just didn't sleep great, Jenna said, forcing a smile as she sipped her instant coffee. Grown-up stuff. You ready for daycare? Ellie nodded, slurping her cereal, and Jenna hustled her into a sweater and sneakers, her hands shaky as she zipped up the backpack. Daycare was a lifeline today. She couldn't handle Ellie asking questions while her brain chewed on those threats. She dropped her off at Little Sprouts, a cramped building off Main Street with peeling paint and a chain-link fence, kissing her forehead before bolting. Be good, sweetie, she called, but her eyes scanned the parking lot, every idling car a potential stalker. Back home, she paced the apartment, the silence deafening. She'd called off her shift at Rosie's, told Mr. Grayson she had a stomach bug, which wasn't far from the truth, and now she was stuck with her thoughts and Nate's damn business card. Sullivan Enterprises. She flipped it over, the embossed letters mocking her. He was the key to this mess. She felt it in her gut, but confronting him meant dragging herself deeper into whatever this was. Still, sitting here waiting for the next text wasn't an option. She needed answers, even if they scared her shitless. She grabbed her phone, punched in the number from the card, and hesitated, thumb hovering over the call button. What if he was in on it? What if he laughed her off? But Ellie's face flashed in her mind, those giggles at the park. That photo, and she hit dial, her breath shallow. It rang twice before his voice came through, low and calm like always. Nate Sullivan. Hi, she stammered, pacing to the window. This Jenna. From Rosie's. Hey, Jenna, he said, and she could hear the surprise in his tone, warm but guarded. Good to hear from you. Everything okay? No, she blurted, her voice sharper than she meant. Everything's not okay. I need to talk to you. Now. Pause, then what's going on? His calm cracked, a little worry creeping in. Not over the phone, she said, peering through the blinds at the empty street. Can you meet me? Somewhere public. The library on Elm Street. Say noon? Yeah, I can do that, he said, no hesitation. I'll be there. You sure you're all right? Just be there. She snapped, then softened. Please. See you at noon, he said, and she hung up, her hands trembling. She had 2 hours to pull herself together, shower, change, figure out how to ask a near stranger why someone wanted her gone because of him. The hot water didn't calm her nerves, and the jeans and hoodie she threw on felt like armor that wouldn't hold. She stuffed Nate's card and her phone in her pocket, grabbed her purse, and headed out, locking the door like it'd keep the world at bay. The Fairmont Public Library was a relic, a squat brick building with ivy choking the walls and windows that hadn't been washed since the 90s. Inside, it smelled like old paper and dust, the kind of quiet that pressed on your chest. Jenna got there 10 minutes early, staking out a table near the back where the stained glass windows threw patchy light across the floor. She sat, knee bouncing, replaying the texts in her head. Stay away. We're watching. Her nails dug into her palms, leaving little half moons, and she kept her eyes on the door. Nate walked in at 11:58, spot on time, and she clocked him instantly. Same sharp suit, same steady stride, but his face was tighter, like he'd caught her panic through the phone. He spotted her, gave a small wave, and crossed the room, pulling out a chair across from her. Up close, he looked less polished than at Rosie's, hair a touch messy, a shadow of stubble on his jaw, but those gray eyes still pinned her in place. Hey, he said, leaning forward, elbows on the table. You look like hell. What's wrong? She swallowed, her throat dry as sand. I got these yesterday, she said, sliding her phone across to him, the texts and photo pulled up. Someone's watching me and Ellie, and they're telling me to stay away from you. Nate's jaw tightened as he read, his fingers gripping the phone harder than necessary. He swiped to the photo, his breath hitching, and when he looked up, his eyes were dark, a storm brewing behind them. Jesus, Jenna, he said, voice low. When did this start? After you came back to the diner, she said, her voice trembling. Tuesday was fine, Wednesday you're drawing with Ellie, and then bam, yesterday this. You tell me what's going on, 'cause I'm freaking out here. He set the phone down, running a hand through his hair. I don't know who sent this, he said, slow, like he was piecing it together. But I've got a guess. A guess? She snapped, leaning in. That's not good enough, Nate. Someone's got pictures of my kid, and they're tying it to you. What the hell did you pull us into? I didn't pull you into anything, he said, firm but not loud. I swear, Jenna, I'm not here to mess up your life, but I run a company, Sullivan Enterprises. Real estate, mostly some development projects. We've pissed people off, competitors, old partners. It's not the first time someone's tried to rattle me. Rattle you? She said, her voice rising until a librarian shushed her from the desk. She dropped it to a hiss. They're not rattling you, they're coming after me. I'm nobody, Nate. I sling hash browns and barely pay my bills. Why me? He exhaled, rubbing his jaw. Because they saw us together, he said. That first day, when Ellie ran up to me, someone must have snapped a picture. This happened before tabloids, rumors. I didn't think it'd follow me here. But if they think you're leverage. Leverage? She cut in, her stomach twisting. What, like I'm some bargaining chip? I've met you twice, Nate. That's not a relationship, that's a couple burgers and a tip. I know, he said, frustration leaking through. It's not about reality, it's about what they think. If they figure you matter to me, they'll use it. And Ellie calling me daddy, that's gold to some asshole looking to stir shit up. Jenna's face burned, anger and fear crashing together. So this is my fault? My kid's imagination screws us over? No, he said, reaching out, then pulling back when she flinched. It's not your fault, it's mine. I should have been careful. I like talking to you. To her. Didn't think it'd blow back like this. She stared at him, her chest heaving. He looked genuinely gutted, eyes shadowed, mouth tight, but that didn't fix the terror gnawing at her. Who's they? She pressed. You said competitors. Give me a name. He hesitated, glancing around the empty library like the walls might snitch. Could be Pierce Industries, he said finally. Big outfit out of Pittsburgh, real estate, too. We're in a bidding war over some land up near Uniontown. They've pulled dirty tricks before, bribes, sabotage. Nothing I can prove, but this smells like them. Pierce, she echoed, the name sour on her tongue. And they'd stalk me over a land deal? They'd stalk anyone if it threw me off, he said, grim. They're ruthless. Dylan Pierce, the son, especially. He's got a temper and a bankroll. If he thinks I've got a weak spot. I'm not your weak spot. She snapped, then lowered her voice. I'm not anything to you, Nate. Tell them to call him up and say I'm just some waitress you met. I would if I could, he said, leaning closer. But they don't care about the truth, they care about the game. And now you're in it, whether we like it or not. Jenna slumped back, her hands fisting in her lap. So what do I do? Hide? Move? I can't afford a bus ticket, let alone a new life. And Ellie, she doesn't deserve this. You don't have to run, he said, his voice steadying. I can help. I've got people, security, guys who know how to handle this. Let me fix it. Fix it? She said, incredulous. You think I trust you to clean up a mess you started? What if your people make it worse? They won't, he said, firm. I've dealt with threats before, business crap, not personal, but I know the drill. I can keep you safe, Jenna. You and Ellie. She laughed. A bitter sound. Safe. That's rich. I was safe till you walked into Rosie's. He flinched but didn't argue. I'm sorry, he said instead, quiet. I didn't mean for this. But I'm here now, and I'm not walking away unless you tell me to. She stared at him, torn. He looked sincere. Hell. He sounded it, but trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Yet what choice did she have? The texts weren't stopping, and she couldn't protect Ellie alone, not against some faceless creep with a camera and a grudge. Fine, she said finally, her voice hard. Help me. But if this goes south, if Ellie gets hurt, I'll never forgive you. Fair, he said, nodding. I'll call my guy, Noah, he's ex-military, knows his stuff. We'll figure out who's behind it and shut it down. Good, she said, standing, her chair scraping the floor. I'm picking Ellie up at 3. I want this sorted before then. It might take longer, he said, standing too. But I'll start now. Meet me tomorrow, same place, same time. I'll have something. She nodded, short and sharp, then grabbed her purse. Don't screw me over, Nate, she said, meeting his eyes. I mean it. I won't, he said, and damn if he didn't sound like he believed it. She turned and walked out, the library's hush swallowing her footsteps. Outside, the air was cool, the street empty, but she felt eyes on her, real or not. They were there. Nate's promise echoed in her head. A lifeline she wasn't sure she could grab. He'd help, sure, but what if he was the devil in disguise? She'd find out soon enough, and the stakes were higher than she'd ever dreamed. Hey y'all, Jenna just laid it all out for Nate. Things are heating up. If you're on edge wondering if he's legit or if Pierce is closing in, smash that subscribe button and drop a comment. What's your call, trust Nate or run? Let's hash it out. The rest of Thursday crawled by like a bad dream Jenna couldn't wake up from. After leaving Nate at the library, she'd picked Ellie up from Little Sprouts, her eyes darting to every shadow in the parking lot, every stranger on the sidewalk. Ellie had chattered about finger painting a frog, oblivious to the way Jenna gripped her hand too tight, her pulse hammering as they climbed the creaky stairs to their apartment. She'd locked the door, checked the windows, and spent the evening on the futon, Ellie curled up beside her watching reruns of SpongeBob. The TV's laugh track grated on her nerves, but it drowned out the silence and the fear clawing at her chest. She didn't sleep again that night, her phone clutched in one hand, Nate's card in the other. Stay away from Sullivan. We're watching. The words looped in her head, that blurry park photo burned into her brain. Nate had promised help some ex-military guy named Noah, but promises didn't lock doors or stop creeps with cameras. By Friday morning, she was running on fumes, her reflection in the bathroom mirror a ghost of herself, pale, hollow-eyed, hair-tangled mess. She splashed cold water on her face, trying to shake the fog, and got Ellie ready for daycare again. Another day off from Rosie's, Mr. Grayson had grumbled, but she'd fed him the same stomach bug lie. Truth was, she couldn't face the diner, not with Nate's shadow hanging over it. Mommy, you're quiet, Ellie said as they trudged to the bus stop, her backpack bouncing, buns poking out the top. Just thinking, sweetie, Jenna said, forcing a smile. You have fun today, okay? Paint me something cool. Ellie nodded, climbing onto the bus with a wave, and Jenna watched it pull away, her stomach twisting. She hated letting her go. Every second apart felt like a gamble now, but she needed time to breathe, to think, to meet Nate again. The library was her next stop, noon sharp, and she spent the morning pacing the apartment, jumping at every creak. She cleaned the kitchenette to keep her hands busy scrubbing the sink, tossing stale bread, but the texts kept creeping back, a poison she couldn't scrub out. By 11:30, she was out the door, locking it tight, her denim jacket pulled close against the chill. The walk to the library was quick, 10 minutes down Main Street, past the gas station and a boarded-up hardware store, but every step felt heavy, like the air itself was pressing her down. She kept her head low, avoiding eye contact with the handful of locals shuffling by, their faces familiar but distant. Fairmont wasn't a place for strangers, yet here she was, tangled up with one and whoever he'd pissed off. The library was quieter today. Just an old lady flipping through a romance novel at the front desk, and a kid tapping at a computer in the corner. Jenna claimed her spot by the stained glass window again, the light throwing red and blue patches across her hands as she waited. Nate showed up at 11:59, pushing through the door with that same steady stride. But his face was different, tighter, jaw clenched, like he'd been up all night too. He wore a navy sweater instead of the suit, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and carried a slim folder under his arm. He slid into the chair across from her, setting the folder down with a soft thud. Hey, he said, voice low. You holding up? Barely, she said, her tone flat. You got anything? Or am I still jumping at shadows? He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Noah's on it. He's digging into Pierce Dillon specifically. Guy's got a rap sheet, assault, intimidation, nothing that stuck, but he's dirty. We're pulling call logs, checking security cams around Fairmont. The slow, but we'll find something. Slow, she echoed, her voice sharp. That's great, Nate. Meanwhile, I'm locking my kid in like a prisoner. You said you'd fix this. I'm trying, he said, meeting her eyes. I know it's not fast enough, believe me. I hate it too. But Noah's good. He'll get us a lead. She leaned forward, hands fisting on the table. And what if he doesn't? What if they're out there right now watching Ellie at daycare? I can't live like this. You won't have to, he said, firm. I've got a guy parked near Little Sprouts today, discreet, just watching. Ellie's safe. You're safe. I'm not letting this spiral. She stared at him, torn between relief and rage. You've got a guy? What, some bodyguard tailing my kid? You didn't think to tell me? I didn't want to freak you out more, he said, wincing. He's there to protect her, not spy. No one's getting near her, Jenna, I swear. She sank back, rubbing her temples. This is insane, she muttered. I don't even know you, and now I've got your goons playing babysitter. They're not goons, he said, a flicker of a smile breaking through. Noah's team's ex-military trained. Quiet. You won't see them unless you need to. Great, she said, sarcastic. Invisible heroes. That fixes everything. He opened the folder, sliding a sheet across a grainy photo of a guy in a leather jacket, mid-30s, buzzed hair and a smirk. This is Dylan Pierce, he said. Recognize him? She squinted at it, her stomach churning. No. Should I? Probably not, he said. He doesn't show his face much, sends lackeys instead. But if he's behind this, we'll nail him. Noah's got a line on a burner phone linked to Pittsburgh. Might match your texts. Might, she said, her voice flat. That's a big word. It's a start, he said, closing the folder. Meet me tomorrow same time. I'll have more. She nodded, short and reluctant, and stood. I'm holding you to that, she said, slinging her purse over her shoulder. Don't let me down. I won't, he said, and she left, his promise hanging in the air like smoke she couldn't trust. The walk home was a blur, gray streets, cold wind, her mind spinning. She stopped at the gas station for a Coke, needing the sugar to steady her nerves, and got back to the apartment by 2 o'clock. The stairwell echoed with her footsteps, the familiar creak of the third step a small comfort. She turned the key, pushed the door open, and froze. Something was wrong. The air smelled off faint, sharp, like cigarettes and cheap cologne. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she stepped inside, eyes darting around. The futon was the same, Ellie's drawing still taped to the wall, but the coffee table was off, pushed an inch to the left. The bills scattered instead of stacked. The kitchenette drawer, the one with the spoons, was cracked open, a fork glinting inside. And there, on the counter, sat a new stuffed bunny, clean, white, a pink ribbon around its neck. A note was pinned under it, handwritten in block letters. Keep Ellie smiling. Stay away. Jenna's knees buckled. She grabbed the counter, her breath hitching, the Coke slipping from her hand to crash on the floor. Soda fizzed across the linoleum, but she barely noticed. Her eyes locked on that bunny so pristine, so wrong next to Bun's ragged charm. Someone had been here inside her home, touching her stuff, leaving this twisted gift. The chair was still under the knob, the deadbolt intact. How? Picked lock? A spare key? Ellie, she whispered, panic clawing her throat. She lunged for her phone, dialing Little Sprouts with shaking hands. It rang once, twice, then Miss Linda's chipper voice answered. Little Sprouts, how can I help? Is Ellie okay? Jenna blurted, her voice breaking. She's there, right? Ellie Carter? Yep, she's fine, Linda said, puzzled. Painting a butterfly last I checked. You alright, hon? Yeah, Jenna lied, her chest heaving. Just checking. Thanks. She hung up, sinking to the floor, the bunny staring down at her like a taunt. They'd been here while she was at the library, while Ellie was safe, but she wasn't. A message, loud and clear. We can get to you anytime. She stumbled to her feet, grabbed the note and bunny, and shoved them into a grocery bag, her hands trembling so hard she nearly dropped it. She couldn't stay here, not with Ellie, not tonight. She dialed Lucy, her voice cracking as it rang. Luce, pick up, please. Yo, what's up? Lucy's voice came through, bright and clueless. Someone broke in, Jenna said, her words tumbling out. My place, they left a note, a freaking bunny. I need you. Holy shit, Lucy said, all cheer gone. Where are you? Ellie? Daycare, Jenna said. I'm home. Can you come? I can't, I don't know what to do. On my way, Lucy said, firm. Sit tight. We'll figure this out. Jenna hung up, clutching the bag, her eyes darting to the locked door. She slid down the wall, the soda puddle cold against her jeans, and stared at that damn note through the plastic. Keep Ellie smiling. A threat wrapped in a sick joke. Nate's words echoed Pierce, Dylan, dirty tricks, but this wasn't a trick anymore. This was real, raw, and in her face. Lucy burst in 20 minutes later, her beat-up Corolla screeching into the lot below. Jesus, Jenna, she said, pulling her into a hug. You okay? No, Jenna whispered, shaking. They were here, Luce. In my house. Lucy grabbed the bag, peering at the bunny and note, her face paling. This is psycho shit, she said. You gotta call the cops. And say what? Jenna said, her voice hollow. They'll say it's nothing, no fingerprints, no proof. Just a toy and a note. Then call that Nate guy, Lucy said. Fierce. He started this, he fixes it. Jenna nodded, numb, and pulled out her phone. Nate picked up on the first ring, his voice tense. Jenna? What's wrong? Someone broke in, she said, her voice breaking. Left a note, keep Ellie smiling. Stay away. A new bunny, Nate. They were in my house. Shit, he breathed, the word sharp. Where are you? Home, she said. Lucy's here. Ellie's at daycare. Stay put, he said. I'm coming with Noah. We'll be there in 20. Don't touch anything else. She hung up, her hands shaking, and looked at Lucy. He's coming, she said, barely a whisper. But I'm scared, Luce. What if they're still out there? Lucy squeezed her shoulder. Hard. Let em try, she said. We've got your back. Jenna nodded. But as the minutes ticked by, the apartment felt like a cage, every creak a footstep, every shadow a threat. Nate was coming, but so was something darker, and she couldn't shake the feeling it was only the beginning. The Pinewood Motel wasn't winning any awards, its beige walls were stained with years of cigarette smoke, the carpet threadbare under Jenna's sneakers, and the single window rattled every time a truck roared past on Route 19. But it was a roof, a lock, and a step away from the nightmare of her apartment, where that white bunny with its pink ribbons still haunted her thoughts. Ellie lay curled up on one of the double beds, her tiny snores a soft rhythm against the hum of the motel's ancient heater. She'd fallen asleep clutching buns, her crayons scattered across the bedspread like a kid's version of a crime scene, innocent, chaotic, and breaking Jenna's heart all at once. Jenna sat on the other bed, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the muted TV flickering with some late-night infomercial about a blender that could change your life. She hadn't changed hers, not yet, and the irony stung. Lucy had bolted an hour ago, her Corolla's taillights fading into the dark after a tearful promise to crash at her cousin's and call tomorrow. You're tough as hell, she'd said, squeezing Jenna's hand, but tough didn't feel like enough when someone had waltzed into her home and left a threat dressed up as a toy. Nate had shown up right after her frantic call, his black SUV screeching into the lot with Noah riding shotgun, a guy built like a linebacker, all scars and silence, his eyes scanning the apartment like he'd seen worse. They'd moved fast, Noah bagging the bunny and note, checking the locks, muttering about no forced entry while Nate hovered near her, his face a mask of guilt and grit. You're not staying here, he'd said, voice clipped, and she'd followed, too shaken to argue. Now, here they were, room 12, a temporary bunker, with Noah posted outside and Nate sitting across from her on a wobbly chair, his navy sweater wrinkled, hands clasped tight like he was holding something in. You should sleep, he said, breaking the quiet, his voice low to keep Ellie under. The glow from the TV carved shadows across his face, making those gray eyes look deeper, older. Can't, Jenna said, her tone flat. She hugged her knees tighter, the denim of her jeans rough against her palms. Every time I close my eyes, I see that damn bunny. Who does that, Nate? Who breaks in and leaves a toy? Someone sick, he said, jaw tightening. Or someone who wants you scared? Probably both. Well, it worked, she snapped, keeping her voice low but sharp. I'm terrified, and Ellie's stuck in this dump because of it. You said you'd handle this, what's your big plan now? He exhaled, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. Noah's working it, tracking the bunny, the note. It's a lead, small but solid. He's got guys watching your place, the daycare. We're not sitting still, Jenna. Not sitting still, she echoed, bitter. Great. Meanwhile, I'm hiding like a rat, and they're still out there. You owe me more than that, you owe me the truth. Why's this happening? What's so special about you? He looked at her, long and steady, then dropped his gaze to the floor, like he was digging up something heavy. All right, he said finally. You want the truth? I'll give it to you. She straightened, her pulse kicking up. Go on. He rubbed his hands together, slow, like he was warming them up for a fight. I wasn't always this, he started, gesturing at himself, the sweater, the watch, the quiet polish. Grew up in McKeesport, just outside Pittsburgh. Steel town, gritty, broke. Dad drove a forklift at the mill. Mom cleaned houses when she wasn't too hungover to get out of bed. We had a trailer single wide, rusted roof, no AC. Me and my brother, Tommy, shared a bunk bed in the back, dodging leaks when it rained. Jenna's chest tightened, but she stayed silent, letting him roll. Tommy was younger 4 years behind me, he said, his voice softening. Kid was a dreamer, always talking about cars, how he'd build one someday, race it down the Ohio River. Had these sketches, crappy pencil stuff, but good, you know? I was the practical one, kept us fed when Mom drank the grocery money, made sure he didn't flunk out. Dad tried, but the mill chewed him up, back injury when I was 12, painkillers after that. He OD'd a year later. Accidental, they said, but it broke us. God, Jenna murmured, her hands unclenching a little. That's rough. Yeah, he said, a ghost of a laugh. Rough's putting it light. Mom spiraled booze, pills, whatever she could get. I was 16, working at a gas station, trying to keep Tommy straight. He was 12, still a kid, but he started running with some punks, stealing hubcaps, smoking weed. I thought I could pull him back, but then the crash happened. He stopped, swallowing hard, and Jenna leaned in, her voice quiet. Crash? Car accident, he said, eyes distant. Tommy and his buddies jacked a beat-up Camaro joyride gone wrong. Cops said they hit a guardrail on 51. Flipped into a ditch. He didn't make it, bled out before the ambulance got there. I was at work pumping gas when they called. Mom didn't even pick up, too wasted to care. Jenna's throat closed up, her hand pressing to her mouth. Nate, don't, he said, sharp then softer. Just don't. I buried him, cheap casket, no headstone cause we couldn't afford it. Mom checked out after that, died of liver failure a year later. I was 18, alone, pissed at the world. Got out, worked construction, clawed my way up real estate, deals, anything to never be that broke again. Built Sullivan Enterprises brick by brick. Made enemies pierce others. That's the short version. She stared at him, the pieces clicking, loss, grit, guilt. So Ellie, me, it's about Tommy? He nodded, slow. Kinda. When she ran up that first day, called me daddy, it was like seeing him again. That spark, that trust. And you're fighting for her like I couldn't fight for him. I lost my family, Jenna. I can't sit back and watch someone take yours. Her chest ached. A tangle of empathy and anger. That's heavy, she said, her voice shaky. I get it, losing people, it sticks. But this isn't your fight to fix. I didn't sign up to be your second chance. I'm not asking you to, he said, leaning closer, eyes fierce. I'm asking you to let me help because I can, and because it's right. Pierce, whoever they're, my mess bleeding onto you. I owe you that much. She studied him, the tension in his jaw, the raw edge in his voice. He wasn't bullshitting her, she felt it. Deep and messy. But it didn't erase the fear, the bunny, the violation of her home. Okay, she said finally, slow. But I need more than words. What's Noah got? He's tracing the bunny brand sold at a chain in Pittsburgh, Nate said, shifting to business. No prints, but he's checking security cams near your place, might catch a face. Got a guy on Ellie's daycare, another on your building. We're close, Pierce is sloppy, they'll slip. Close? She muttered, rubbing her face. That's not enough when they're in my house. It will be, he said, firm. I've got a safe house better than this dump. Move you there tomorrow, tighter security. Noah's meeting us at 10 a.m. He'll have an update. She nodded, reluctant but cornered. Fine. But if this goes wrong, if Ellie's in danger, I'm done. Nate. I'll take her and run, and you won't find us. Understood, he said. A flicker of something, respect, maybe crossing his face. He stood, grabbing his keys. Get some rest. Noah's outside, no one's getting through him. I'll be back in the morning. She watched him go, the door clicking shut, leaving her with Ellie's snores and the TV's drone. His story sank into her, Tommy, the crash, the weight he carried. It made him real, not just some suit with cash and promises, and that scared her more than the threats. Because real people failed, and she'd seen too much failure already. She crawled beside Ellie, pulling the blanket over them, her daughter's warmth a tether. The phone sat silent on the nightstand, no texts tonight, but she knew it wouldn't last. Nate's past was a ghost in the room, and Pierce or whoever was a shadow outside it. She closed her eyes, exhaustion dragging her down, but sleep was a thin shield. Tomorrow loomed, and whatever Nate brought with it, she'd face it for Ellie, for herself, and maybe, just maybe, for the broken kid he'd once been. Hey, y'all. Nate just peeled back the layers. His past is a gut punch, right? If you're hooked on how it ties to Jenna and Ellie's fight, smash that subscribe button and drop a comment. Is he their savior or their curse? What's your vibe? Let's unpack it. Saturday morning crept into the Pinewood Motel like a thief, the thin light slipping through the rattly window to spill across the stained carpet. Jenna woke with a jolt, her neck stiff from the lumpy pillow, Ellie's little body still pressed against her under the scratchy blanket. The heater buzzed like a tired old man, and the room smelled faintly of mildew now, the bleach overtaken by dampness from a night of restless half-sleep. She rubbed her eyes, the weight of Nate's story, Tommy, the crash, the ghosts he carried still heavy in her chest, mixing with the dread that hadn't let go since the break-in. Ellie stirred, blinking up at her with sleepy brown eyes. "Mommy, can we go home today?" She mumbled, clutching buns tighter, her voice small and hopeful. Jenna's heart twisted. "Not yet, sweetie," she said, brushing a curl from her daughter's face. "Soon, though. How about some breakfast?" Ellie nodded, yawning, and Jenna rummaged through their bag for the last of the granola bars, peanut butter, a little crushed, but it'd do. She handed it over, watching Ellie nibble at it, crumbs tumbling onto the bedspread as she kicked her legs under the blanket. The normalcy of it, her kid eating, humming some tune, felt like a lifeline, fragile and fraying. "Keep Ellie smiling." That damn note echoed in her head, a sick taunt she couldn't shake. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Lucy. Texting. "Still alive? Need coffee?" Jenna tapped back a quick yeah. "Tchx. Motel life sucks." Her fingers stiff from clutching it all night. No new threats. No creepy photos. But the silence didn't feel safe, it felt like the calm before a storm. Nate's knock came at 10:03, firm and on time, and she opened the door to find him there, gray jacket zipped against the chill. His face etched with the same sleepless strain she felt. Noah loomed behind him, a silent sentinel in a black hoodie, his scarred neck catching the light as he scanned the lot. "Morning," Nate said, stepping in, his voice low to keep Ellie from spooking. He carried a paper bag, donuts. She smelled them before he set it down, and a slim folder tucked under his arm. "You two okay?" "Barely," Jenna said, shutting the door as Noah stayed outside, a shadow by the SUV. "Ellie's asking for home. I'm asking for answers." "Fair," he said, setting the bag on the dresser. "Got donuts, thought she'd like 'em. And this." He tapped the folder, opening it to a grainy photo of Dylan Pierce leather jacket. Buzz cut, that smirk she was starting to hate. Noah's got traction. Burner phones from a corner store in Pittsburgh cash by. But the clerk remembers a guy like Dylan. "And we've got a plate, black Dodge. Circled your block Thursday. Tied to a dummy corp Pierce runs." Jenna's stomach sank, cold and hard. "So it's him. For sure?" "Closed as we've got," Nate said, grim. Noah's digging deeper, cams, calls. "We're building a net." "A net?" she muttered, crossing her arms. "That's not a cage, Nate. What's the move?" "Noah's got eyes on Dylan," he said, leaning against the dresser. "Two guys, ex-cops, tight, watching his spots in Pittsburgh. We're staying ahead. You and Ellie stick here till we've got more." "Here?" she said, glancing at the peeling wallpaper. "This ain't safe, it's a motel, not a bunker." "It's off the radar," he said, firm. "Booked under Noah's alias, cash only. No one knows you're here. He's outside, got a guy a block up. You're covered." She sighed, rubbing her temples. "Fine. But Ellie's got daycare last day till Monday. She needs normal, Nate. I can't keep her locked up." "I'll take you," he said, no hesitation. "Noah's man stays on the building. We're tight." "All right," she said, reluctant but cornered. "Let's do it." They loaded up, Ellie in the back seat with a chocolate donut, Jenna up front, Nate driving. The ride to Little Sprouts was quiet, the hum of the engine filling the space where words failed. Ellie munched happily, smearing chocolate on buns, while Jenna watched the side mirror, every pickup and sedan a potential threat. Nate's calm steadied her, his hands sure on the wheel. His jaw set, but her nerves buzzed, a live wire she couldn't cut. He pulled into the daycare lot at 10:50, gravel crunching under the tires, the usual chaos of drop-off in full swing, kids running, moms chatting, Miss Linda waving from the door. "See ya, Mommy," Ellie called, hopping out with her backpack, darting inside as Jenna waved, her throat tight. "She's good," Nate said, catching her flinch. Noah's guys across the street, gray Tacoma, bearded fella. "No one's touching her." "Yeah," she muttered, unconvinced. and they drove back to the motel, the silence heavier now. The day dragged Nate on calls with Noah, Jenna flipping through TV channels, the drone of a talk show barely drowning her thoughts. By 2 o'clock, she was pacing, the room a cage. "I need a break," she said, grabbing her jacket. "Gonna hit the vending machine." "Stay in sight," Nate said, looking up from his phone. "I'll come." "No," she cut in, needing space. "It's right there. I'll be fine." He nodded, tense, and she stepped out, the cold slapping her face as she crossed to the machine by the office. She fed it $1, the clunk of a Coke can dropping a small relief, and turned back. Then her phone buzzed, sharp and loud. A text from Miss Linda. "Ellie's safe, but some guy just tried picking her up, said he was her uncle. We held him off, called your friend's guy." Jenna's knees buckled, the Coke slipping to the gravel with a hiss. She ran back, bursting into the room. "Nate," she yelled, her voice raw. "Someone tried to take Ellie." He shot up, phone clattering to the floor. "What? Now?" "Daycare just texted," she said, shoving her phone at him, tears stinging her eyes. "Said he was her uncle. Noah's guy stopped him." Nate snatched it, reading fast, his face darkening. "Son of a bitch," he muttered, dialing Noah. "What's happening at Little Sprouts?" "Talk." Jenna paced, her hands shaking, as Nate barked into the phone. "Yeah? Hoodie? Plates? Get him now." He hung up, turning to her. Guy in a black hoodie, 30s, bolted in a Dodge sedan when Noah's man moved in. "Their chasing plates match the one from your block." "Pierce," she said, her voice breaking, rage and fear crashing together. "He went for Ellie. Nate, my baby." "I know," he said, stepping close, his hands hovering like he wanted to hold her up. "Noah's on him 2 miles out, tailing. We've got him." "You've got nothing," she shouted, then dropped her voice, trembling. "He almost had her. What if your guy blinked? What if she's gone right now?" "He didn't," Nate said, firm, grabbing her shoulders. "Ellie's safe. Linda's got her locked in. Noah's man's there. I'm calling it in. We're ending this." She yanked free, sinking onto the bed, her breath ragged. "I told you," she said, tears spilling. "I told you if she got hurt, I'm done. This is it." Nate too close. "I'm sorry," he said, kneeling in front of her, his voice cracking. "I fucked up, thought we had more time." But he's cornered now. He showed his hand. "His hand?" she said, wiping her face. "He showed he can get to her." "I can't. I need her here now." "Okay," he said, standing. "We're going picking her up. Noah's guy holds till we're there." She nodded, grabbing her purse, her hands shaking as they bolted for the SUV. The drive back was a nightmare, Jenna's nails digging into her palms, Nate weaving through traffic, his jaw clenched so tight she thought it'd crack. The daycare lot was a mess when they screeched in. A cop car parked sloppy, lights flashing, Miss Linda pacing by the door, and Noah's guy Rick, bearded and burly, talking to an officer, his gray Tacoma idling nearby. Ellie burst out as Jenna flung the door open, running into her arms. "Mommy," she sobbed, clinging tight. "A man said I had to go with him. He was scary." "I've got you," Jenna said, dropping to her knees, hugging her hard, tears streaming. "You're safe. Baby, I'm here." Nate strode to Rick, his voice low and furious. "What the hell happened?" "Caught him at the gate," Rick said, gruff. "Hoodie," Buzzcut claimed he was her uncle. Linda stalled. "I moved and he ran." Sedan took off, but Noah's got him pinned on 19. "Cops are rolling." "Good," Nate said, fists clenched. "Tell Noah to hold him, no slip-ups." "Done," Rick said, nodding at the cop. "Left a coffee cup prints, maybe." Jenna rocked Ellie, her sobs quieting, but her own heart pounded wild. "You're okay," she whispered, kissing her forehead, but the terror lingered sharp, suffocating. This wasn't a game anymore. It was her kid, her life, dangling by a thread. Nate crouched beside her, his hand light on her arm. "We've got him, Jenna," he said, voice steady but strained. "This is the break. We're done running." "Done?" she said, meeting his eyes, her voice raw. "We're just starting." "They're not stopping." "Nate, what's next?" He didn't answer, his silence a weight, and as the cop's radio crackled with updates, suspect detained, Route 19, she held Ellie tighter, her world shrinking to that little heartbeat. They'd caught someone, sure, but the shadow was still out there, and she wasn't sure Nate's net was strong enough to hold it. The Pinewood Motel felt like a prison cell by late Saturday afternoon, its beige walls closing in as the day bled into dusk. Jenna sat on the edge of the bed, Ellie nestled against her. The little girl's breathing slow and steady now after hours of clinging like a lifeline. The TV flickered with some cartoon about talking dogs, the volume low, but Jenna barely heard it. Her mind was a storm, replaying Ellie's sobs, the daycare chaos, Nate's promises. The cops' radio had crackled with suspect detained before they'd left Little Sprouts. A small victory that didn't feel like winning. Not when her kid's tear-streaked face was burned into her brain. Not when every creak outside made her jump. Nate stood by the window, peering through the blinds at Noah's truck idling in the lot, his gray jacket zipped tight against the chill seeping through the glass. He'd been on the phone with Noah for the last 20 minutes, his voice a low rumble of clipped orders: check the prints, tail the sedan, call the precinct. And Jenna watched him, torn between gratitude and a growing itch she couldn't name. He'd saved Ellie today. No question Rick had stopped that creep cold, but the why still gnawed at her. Why her? Why them? His story about Tommy explained the guilt, the drive, but it didn't fit the whole puzzle. You hungry? Nate asked, turning from the window, his gray eyes catching hers. He looked beat, stubble darkening his jaw, shadows under his eyes, but his voice was steady, like he was holding it together for her. Not really, she said, stroking Ellie's hair, the curls soft under her fingers. Ellie might be. She's been out since we got back. I'll grab something, he said, grabbing his keys. Pizza okay? There's a joint a mile up, quick run. Yeah, she said, nodding. Pepperoni. She likes that. Got it, he said, a faint smile breaking through. Be back in 15. Noah's outside, yell if you need anything. She nodded, and he slipped out, the door clicking shut behind him. The room went quiet, just Ellie's soft breaths and the cartoon's muffled yips, and Jenna let her head tip back against the headboard, exhaustion tugging at her bones. Her purse sat on the nightstand, half open, and something caught her eye: Nate's folder, the one with Dylan Pierce's smirky face, poking out where he'd left it on the dresser. She'd seen him flip through it earlier, but he'd kept it close, like it was more than just evidence. She glanced at Ellie still out, then slid off the bed, her sneakers silent on the carpet. She shouldn't snoop, knew it, felt it, but the itch was too strong. If Nate was holding back, if there was more to this mess than Tommy's ghost, she needed to know. She grabbed the folder, her hands shaky, and flipped it open, the papers rustling too loud in the quiet. Dylan's photo was on top, leather jacket, buzz cut, that asshole grin, but beneath it was a mess of printouts. Emails, maps, a grainy shot of a black Dodge sedan. She skimmed an email Noah to Nate, dated 2 days ago, about the burner phone, the Pittsburgh store, the plate tie to Pierce. Solid, like he'd said. But then she hit a page that stopped her cold, a yellowed newspaper clipping, folded tight, the edges frayed like it had been carried too long. She unfolded it, her breath catching. McKeesport Blaze claims 2, teen survives, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, August 14, 2005. The article was short, brutal. A trailer fire, faulty wiring, a mother and son dead. A 16-year-old boy pulled from the wreckage. No names, just the surviving teen and ongoing investigation. But the date lined up with Nate's story: Tommy, the crash, the family he'd lost. Except he'd said Tommy died in a car wreck, not a fire. Her stomach twisted, a cold prickle running up her spine. She flipped to the next page, a handwritten note, Nate's scrawl, dated last year. Uniontown deal, Pierce knows. Check records, 05 fire. Covers thin. Beneath it, a photocopy of an old police report, smudged but legible. Nathan Sullivan, 16, questioned fire origin. No charges filed, insufficient evidence. Suspicion of arson unproven. Her hands shook harder, the folder nearly slipping. Arson? Nate? The report mentioned a lighter, a gas can, conflicting witness statements, neighbors saying he'd fought with his mom that day. A kid claiming he'd seen Nate running before the smoke started. What the hell? She whispered, her voice trembling. She dug deeper, another email, this one from Noah, 3 months back. Dylan's digging found the 05 file. Leverage if he pushes. Keep her out of it. Her? Who her? Ellie? She sank onto the bed, the papers spilling across her lap, her mind racing. Nate hadn't just lost his family, he'd been suspected in their deaths. And Pierce knew had something on him, something big enough to drag her into this nightmare. The door clicked, and she jolted, shoving the folder shut as Nate stepped in, a pizza box in hand. He froze, eyes flicking from her face to the papers, and his jaw tightened. Jenna, he said, slow, setting the box down. What are you doing? What am I doing? She said, her voice rising despite Ellie sleeping inches away. She stood, holding the folder like a weapon. What's this, Nate? Arson. Your family, you said Tommy died in a crash, not a fire. Were you lying? He flinched, hands up like she'd swung at him. It's not what you think, he said, low and urgent. Put that down, let me explain. Explain? She hissed, stepping closer, tears burning her eyes. You've been feeding me half-truths while someone's after my kid. Explain that. Did you start that fire? Is that why Pierce is on us? No, he said, fierce, grabbing the folder from her and tossing it on the dresser. I didn't start it, I was cleared. Sit down, Jenna, please. She didn't sit, crossing her arms, her chest heaving. Then talk. Now. He exhaled, rubbing his face, then leaned against the wall, eyes dark. The fire was real, Mom, and Tommy died, like I said. But it wasn't a crash, that's what I tell people. Easier than the truth. We were fighting that day. Mom was drunk, screaming, threw a bottle at me. I stormed out, went to work. Came back to flames, neighbors pulled me out, but I couldn't get to them. Cops found a gas can in the wreckage, hers. For the lawnmower, but they pinned it on me. Said I'd snapped, torched the place. No proof, just talk. Case dropped. No proof, she said, her voice trembling. But they thought you did it. And Pierce knows your note says he's got leverage. Yeah, he said, grim. Dylan dug it up, old records, rumors. He's been dangling it over me, threatened to leak it. Tank my company. Uniontown deal's worth millions, he wants it. And he'll smear me to get it. That's why he's after you, to break me. Break you? She said, incredulous. He's breaking me. Nate, my kid almost got snatched today because of your damn past. I know, he said, stepping closer, his voice cracking. And I hate it, I didn't think he'd go this far. I thought it was just business scare tactics, not this. I'm sorry. Jenna, I should have told you everything. Damn right you should have, she said, tears spilling now. You dragged us into your war, Ellie's a pawn because you couldn't come clean. It's not like that, he said, desperate. I'm protecting you. Noah's got the guy from today, prints are in, cops are moving. Pierce slipped, he's done. Done? She said, wiping her face. Or pissed off enough to hit harder. You lied, Nate, crash or fire, you hit it. How do I trust you now? He looked at her, gutted, hands fisting at his sides. You don't have to, he said, quiet. But I'm not walking away, I owe you this. Noah's tracing the sedan, tying it to Dylan. We've got evidence, real, not rumors. Let me finish it. She sank onto the bed, her legs shaky, Ellie stirring beside her. Mommy? She mumbled, blinking up. It's okay. Sweetie, Jenna said, pulling her close, her voice thick. Go back to sleep. Ellie nestled in, drifting off, and Jenna glared at Nate. Finish it, she said, low and hard. But no more secrets or I'm gone, and you'll never see us again. Deal, he said, nodding, his eyes raw. I'll call Noah, update you tomorrow. Get some rest. He grabbed the folder and stepped out, the door clicking shut, leaving her with the pizza's greasy smell and a truth that cut deeper than the threats. Nate wasn't just haunted, he was hunted. And his past was a noose tightening around them all. She hugged Ellie tighter, the cartoon dogs yapping on, and wondered if the man she'd trusted to save them was the one who damned them first. Hey y'all, Jenna just uncovered Nate's big secret, talk about a twist. If you're reeling from this and dying to know if he's still the hero or the villain, smash that subscribe button and drop a comment. What's Pierce's next move? Let's figure it out together. Sunday morning draped the Pinewood Motel in a gray shroud, the rain tapping a relentless beat against the window as if it wanted in. Jenna woke with a start, her body stiff from the motel bed's unforgiving springs. Ellie's warmth pressed against her side, a small anchor in the storm of her thoughts. The little girl slept on, her chestnut curls splayed across the pillow, buns clutched tight under her chin. The room smelled faintly of stale pizza and damp carpet, the heaters hum a weak defense against the chill seeping through the walls. Jenna rubbed her eyes, Nate's confession from last night, arson, suspicion, pierced nose still clawing at her mind, a wound that wouldn't close. She glanced at the clock, 6:47 a.m. and slid out of bed, her sneakers scuffing the worn carpet as she checked her phone. No new texts, no calls, just an eerie quiet that felt more like a threat than a relief. Ellie's close call at the daycare yesterday replayed on a loop, her sobs, the cop lights flashing, Nate's promise that they'd caught the guy. Ricky Voss, he'd said, a Pierce lackey, pinned down on Route 19. But the victory tasted hollow with Ethan's shadow looming in her head, stirred up by Nate's half-truths and her own restless dreams. "Mommy?" Ellie's sleepy voice broke the silence, her brown eyes blinking up as she hugged Buns tighter. "Is it raining?" "Yeah, baby," Jenna said, forcing a smile as she sat back down, brushing a curl from her daughter's forehead. "Just a little. You sleep okay?" "Uh-huh," Ellie mumbled, yawning big. "Can we have pancakes?" Jenna's throat tightened. Pancakes were a memory of their cramped apartment kitchen, not this limbo of a motel. "Not today," she said, softening the blow. "But I've got some cereal left. Fruit Loops sound good?" Ellie nodded, settling for less, and Jenna dug into their bag, pouring the last of the colorful loops into a motel coffee cup. She handed it over, watching Ellie munch away, crumbs tumbling onto the blanket as she kicked her legs. The normalcy of it, her kid eating, humming some tune, was a fragile thread, fraying under the weight of keep Ellie smiling echoing from that damn note. Her phone buzzed. Lucy, texting. "You alive? Need me?" Jenna tapped back a quick "yeah, barely," T-checks, her fingers stiff from clutching it all night. Nate's knock came at 10:05, softer than his usual rap, and she opened the door to find him standing there, rain-soaked and weary. His gray jacket clung to his shoulders, water dripping from the hem, and his face carried the strain of a sleepless night, stubble rough, eyes shadowed. He held a styrofoam cup in one hand, a manila envelope in the other, and stepped inside as she shut the door against the damp. "Morning," he said, voice low to keep Ellie calm. "Brought coffee." "Thanks," she said, taking the cup, the heat seeping into her palms but not her tone. "What's up?" He set the envelope on the dresser, glancing at Ellie, who was now coloring on the bed, lost in her own world. "Noah's got Voss locked down," he said, keeping it quiet. "Prince match. Cops have him in Pittsburgh. Small fry says he's Pierce's muscle, but he's not talking much. Sedan's tied to Dylan's shell corp plates, paperwork. We're building a case." "Building," she said, sipping the coffee bitter, thin. "Not built. What about Pierce himself?" Nate rubbed his neck, raindrops sliding from his hair. "Dylan's rattled Voss was a dumb move, too bold. Noah's got guys on his tail in Pittsburgh watching his office, his condo. Cops are looping in. We're closing the net." "Closing," she muttered, her voice edged. "Heard that before. And your past? That fire Pierce's leverage? Where's that fit?" He met her eyes, steady but strained. "Dylan's got the rumors, yeah, threatened to leak tank my deal. But Voss gives us ammo, real evidence, not ghosts. I'm handling it, Jenna, I swear." "Handling it," she said, sharp. "Like you handled telling me the truth?" "I don't trust you, Nate, not after last night." He flinched, nodding slow. "I know," he said, quiet. "I fucked up, should have laid it all out. No more secrets, I promise. I'm here, I'm not running." She studied him, the rain streaking the window behind him, and opened her mouth to push harder. Then a knock rattled the door, slow and heavy, not Noah's crisp tap. Nate tensed, hand dropping to his phone, and Jenna's stomach lurched. "Who's that?" she whispered, stepping toward Ellie. "Dunno," he said, moving to the blinds, peering out. "Not Noah, truck's still there. Stay back." He cracked the door, rain spitting in, and Jenna caught a glimpse of a tall, lanky guy in a soaked hoodie, hands shoved deep in his pockets, face shadowed but achingly familiar. "Looking for Jenna Carter," he said, voice rough, a gravelly echo from a life she'd buried. "Who's asking?" Nate said, blocking the doorway, his tone steel. "Ethan," the guy said, and Jenna's world tilted, her coffee slipping to the carpet with a dull splash. "Ethan, her Ethan, Ellie's dad, The man who'd walked out 6 years ago, leaving her pregnant and shattered in Altoona. She pushed past Nate, shoving the door wide, rain hitting her face as she stared at him, gaunt, unshaven, hazel eyes sunken under wet brown hair, but unmistakable. "Ethan?" she said, her voice breaking, stepping out into the drizzle. "What the hell are you doing here?" He shifted, water dripping off his hood, glancing at Nate, then back to her. "Heard you were in trouble," he said low, almost sheepish. "Came to see my kid." "Your kid?" she said, incredulous, her voice rising as Nate hovered close. "You don't get to call her that. You bailed, Ethan. 6 years, no word, no nothing. How'd you even find me?" "Word gets around," he said, shrugging, his eyes darting to the room. "Saw a picture online, you and her at that diner, some suit. Figured you needed help." "Help?" she snapped, rain soaking her hair, her fists clenching. "You don't know shit about my life." "What picture?" He pulled out a phone, cheap, cracked screen, and swiped to a grainy shot. Her and Ellie at Rosie's, Nate at table 5, the day Ellie called him daddy. Blurry, but clear enough, posted on some shady forum, time-stamped a week ago. "This," he said, holding it up. "Comments said you were tangled up with trouble. I've been in Pittsburgh, heard talk at a bar. Came to check." "Talk?" Nate cut in, stepping forward, his voice hard. "From who? Pierce?" Ethan's eyes narrowed, sizing Nate up. "Don't know a Pierce. Just barflies guys saying some rich prick's got a beef. I ain't here to fight. Man, just wanna see Ellie." "You don't get to see her," Jenna said, her voice trembling with fury, rain mixing with tears she didn't feel. "You don't stroll back in like some hero. You're nothing to her. You left me broke and pregnant, Ethan. Where were you?" He looked away, jaw tight, then back at her. "I was a mess, Jen, drinking, running. I fucked up, I know it. Took me years to scrape myself together. Been working odd jobs, trying to stay clean. When I saw that pic, I thought maybe I could fix something." "Fix?" she said, laughing, bitter and raw. "You can't fix 6 years. And now? Someone's after us, breaking in, trying to snatch her, and you think you can just waltz in? After you?" he said, frowning, stepping closer. "What's going on? Who's this guy?" He jerked his head at Nate. "None of your damn business," she said, but Nate stepped in, voice low. "Ethan, right?" he said, calm but edged. "I'm Nate Sullivan. Your timing's shit. I'm handling this. If you've got info on who's talking, spill it. Otherwise, walk." Ethan bristled, hands balling in his pockets. "Handling it, huh? Looks like you're dragging her into your crap. I heard stuff, big shot, shady past. That you?" Nate's eyes darkened, but he didn't bite. "You don't know me," he said. "Jenna, your call. He stays or goes." She stared at Ethan, rain plastering her hair to her face, memories crashing in his crooked grin, the empty Altoona apartment, the silence after he'd gone. "Go," she said, hard. "You don't get a second chance, not now, not like this." "Jen, come on," he said, softer, pleading. "I'm her dad, I've got rights." "You've got nothing," she said, stepping back. "Get out." He hesitated, then nodded, slow, rain dripping off his nose. "All right," he said. "But I'm not far, staying at the Red Roof off 79. If you need me, I'm there." He turned, trudging back to a beat-up Ford in the lot, and Jenna watched him go, her chest heaving. Nate shut the door, locking it, and turned to her, rain dripping from his jacket. "You okay?" he asked, soft. "No," she said, wiping her face, her voice shaky. "He's back. Why now? That picture, who took it?" "Pierce, maybe," Nate said, grim. "Or someone working for him, spreading bait. Ethan's a wild card, could be legit, could be a plant." "A plant?" she said, her stomach twisting. "You think he's with them?" "Dunno," he said, grabbing his phone. "I'll have Noah check Pittsburgh ties, bar talk. Timing's too neat." She sank onto the bed, Ellie stirring beside her. "Mommy?" she mumbled, blinking up. "It's okay, sweetie," Jenna said, pulling her close, her voice thick. "Just talking. Go back to sleep." Ellie nestled in, drifting off, and Jenna looked at Nate, rain drumming outside. "He said he heard whispers," she said, low. "What if he's not lying? What if he knows something? Then we use it," Nate said, dialing Noah. "But we don't trust him, not yet. I'll dig, stay here, keep her close." She nodded, her arms tight around Ellie. Ethan's face burned into her mind. He was back, a ghost from her past crashing into this nightmare. And she didn't know if he was a lifeline or a noose. Nate's call connected, his voice fading to a murmur. But the rain kept tapping, a rhythm of doubt she couldn't escape. The rain hadn't let up by Sunday afternoon, turning the Pinewood Motel's gravel lot into a muddy swamp that sucked at Jenna's sneakers as she paced outside room 12. Ellie was inside, safe for now, coloring under the dim glow of the motel lamp while the TV droned on with some cartoon about singing bears. Jenna's denim jacket was soaked through, her hair plastered to her face, but she couldn't sit still, not with Ethan's return buzzing in her head like a wasp she couldn't swat. Nate stood a few feet away, phone pressed to his ear, barking orders to Noah through the downpour, his gray jacket dark with rain. Ethan leaned against the motel wall, hands shoved in his hoodie pockets, watching her with those sunken hazel eyes that made her want to scream. Noah's got a hit, Nate said, hanging up, rain dripping off his nose as he turned to her. Voss cracked spilled that Dylan Pierce hired him direct. Said it was a message job, scare you, hit me where it hurts. Cops are moving on Pierce's office in Pittsburgh now. Scare me, Jenna said, her voice trembling with rage, rain mixing with the heat in her chest. He sent a guy to snatch my kid. That's not a message, Nate, that's a goddamn attack. I know, he said, stepping closer, his voice steady but tight. Voss gave up a meat spot, Duffy's bar, north side. Matches what Ethan said. Noah's pulling tapes might catch Dylan there. Duffy's, Ethan cut in, pushing off the wall, his tone rough. Told you heard that loudmouth there. Flashing cash. If it's your guy, he's cocky, thinks he's untouchable. Cocky gets caught, Nate said, eyes narrowing at Ethan. But you still don't buy your clean. Pittsburgh's Pierce's turf, you sure you're not in his pocket? Fuck you, Ethan snapped, stepping forward, fists clenching. I came for my kid, not your war. I don't know this Pierce asshole, I heard bar talk. That's it. Enough, Jenna said, sharp, cutting between them. I don't care who's swinging their dick here, someone's after Ellie, and I want them gone. Nate, you trust Noah's intel? Yeah, he said, wiping rain from his face. Voss is singing, cops have the sedan, prints, a paper trail. Dylan's cornered, he's just too dumb to know it yet. Then we end it, she said, her voice hard. I'm not waiting for him to try again, Ethan's here, you've got leads. Use it. Nate nodded, glancing at Ethan. Your intel, Noah, everything. Duffy's, the guy, every word. We're rolling now. Ethan shrugged, reluctant but stuck. Fine. But I see her after Ellie. That's the deal. Deal's what I say it is, Jenna said, glaring. Help first, then we talk. They piled into Nate's SUV, Jenna up front, Ethan in the back, the tension thick as the rain pelting the windshield. Nate drove fast, tires hissing on wet asphalt, heading for Rosie's diner, neutral ground, he'd said, to meet Noah and plan. The wipers slapped a frantic rhythm, and Jenna's hands twisted in her lap. Ethan's presence a ghost she couldn't shake. 6 years gone, and now he was here, muddying a fight she'd never asked for. Rosie's was half dead when they pulled in, the neon sign buzzing faint through the storm. Inside, the air smelled like burnt coffee and wet leather. A handful of regulars hunched over plates, Lucy wiping the counter with a rag. She spotted Jenna and froze, eyebrows shooting up. Girl, you look like a drowned rat, she said, then clocked Ethan, her jaw dropping. Wait, holy shit. Is that? Yeah, Jenna cut in low. Long story. We need a booth, quiet. Lucy nodded, waving them to the back, her eyes darting between Ethan and Nate like she was watching a soap opera unfold. They slid into a corner booth, vinyl cracked, table sticky, Nate beside Jenna, Ethan across, his hoodie dripping onto the seat. Noah showed up 5 minutes later, a hulking shadow in a black raincoat, sliding in beside Ethan with a folder thick with papers. Voss talked, Noah said, voice a growl, tossing the folder down. Dylan paid him $2,000, half up front, half after. Job was to rattle Sullivan's girl, he nodded at Jenna. Break in, daycare hit. Pierce wanted Nate, distracted, Uniontown deals closing tomorrow. Rattle me, Jenna said, her voice shaking, hands fisting on the table. He almost took my kid, where is he now? Pittsburgh, Noah said, flipping open the folder, photos, maps, a shot of Dylan at Duffy's, timestamped last week. Cops raided his office, found burner phones, cash, but he's gone. Slipped out before they locked it down. My guys got a bead, spotted him at a warehouse off 51. An hour ago. Then we go, Jenna said, leaning forward. I'm not waiting, he's done running. Jenna Nate started, but she cut him off. No, she said, fierce. He's after Ellie, I'm ending this. You've got the car, Noah's got the spot. Let's move. Noah glanced at Nate, who nodded, grim. All right, Nate said. But we're smart, cops are looped in, backups on call. Ethan, you're with us. Prove you're clean. Ethan smirked, leaning back. Whatever gets me to my kid, man. They rolled out. Lucy's worried, be careful. Trailing behind as they hit the road. The rain, a gray curtain blurring Fairmont into Pittsburgh's sprawl. The warehouse loomed off Route 51, an old steel shell. Rusted and sagging, windows boarded. A black Dodge sedan parked crooked by a loading dock. Noah killed the lights a block out, coasting in silent, and Jenna's pulse hammered, her hand gripping the door like it'd steady her. There, Noah said, nodding at the sedan. Dylan's ride matches Voss's plates. Plan? Ethan asked, cracking his knuckles, his voice tight. Noah and I go in, Nate said, pulling a flashlight from the glove box. Jenna, you and Ethan stay here, watch the car. Call if he bolts. No way, Jenna said, unbuckling fast. I'm not sitting, Ellie's my fight. Jenna Nate tried, but she glared, cutting him off. I'm in, she said, hard. Ethan, you're with me. Ethan nodded. No argument, and Nate sighed, handing her the flashlight. Stay behind me, he said. Noah leads. They slipped out, rain soaking them instantly, Noah taking point with a gun tucked under his coat. Legal, he'd said. Ex-cop carry. The warehouse door hung ajar, creaking as Noah pushed it, the dark inside swallowing the beam of Jenna's light. It smelled like rust and oil, the air thick with damp, and their footsteps echoed on cracked concrete. A figure moved ahead, tall, leather jacket, turning fast as Noah barked. Dylan Pierce, hands up. Dylan froze, smirking even as rain dripped from his buzzed hair. Well shit, he said, voice oily. Sullivan's posse cute. What's this, a citizen's arrest? Shut it, Noah said, gun steady. You're done, Voss rolled. Cops have your cash, your phones. Game's up. Dylan laughed, stepping back, hands raised but casual. You think that punk's word holds? I'm clean, lawyers'll shred you. Not with this, Nate said, tossing a photo on the ground. Duffy's, Dylan with Voss, time-stamped. And the sedan outside, your prints, your plates. Uniontown's mine, Dylan, you're finished. Dylan's smirk faltered, eyes darting to Jenna. And you, he said, sneering. The waitress should have stayed out. Your kid's a nice touch, real leverage. Jenna lunged, flashlight raised, but Ethan grabbed her arm, holding her back. Easy, he muttered, his grip tight. Don't, Nate said, stepping forward, voice cold. Mention her again, and I'll let her loose. Cops are 2 minutes out, your call. Dylan's eyes flicked to the door, then back, and he bolted, darting for a side exit, boots slamming concrete. Noah tackled him hard, pinning him face down, cuffs snapping on as Dylan swore, thrashing in the mud. You're dead, Sullivan. He spat, but Noah yanked him up, dragging him toward the SUV as sirens wailed closer. Jenna's legs shook, the flashlight trembling in her hand, rain blurring her vision. That's it, she said, turning to Nate, her voice raw. He's caught? Yeah, Nate said, breathing hard, rain streaking his face. Cops take him, evidence sticks, he's gone. Ethan let go, stepping back, his eyes on Dylan's writhing form. Good, he said low. Bastard deserved it. They trudged back to the car, Noah shoving Dylan into the arriving cop car, lights flashing red and blue through the storm. Jenna sank into the passenger seat, soaked and shaking, Ethan climbing in behind her, silent but tense. It's over? She asked, looking at Nate as he slid behind the wheel. Pierce's, he said, starting the engine. But we're not done, Ethan's still a question. She glanced back at Ethan, his face unreadable, rain dripping from his hood. Dylan was down, but Ethan's return and whatever he carried loomed like a shadow she couldn't outrun. The sirens faded as they pulled away, leaving the warehouse behind, but the fight felt far from finished. Hey y'all, Dylan's down, but Ethan's still in play. What a showdown. If you're buzzing from this clash and wondering what's next, smash that subscribe button and drop a comment. Is Ethan a hero or a snake? Let's tear into it. The rain had softened to a drizzle by Sunday evening, a gray mist hanging over Fairmont as Nate's SUV rolled back into the Pinewood Motel's lot, tires crunching on wet gravel. Jenna sat in the passenger seat, her hands clenched in her lap, the adrenaline from the warehouse showdown still buzzing in her veins. Ellie was safe inside room 12, watched by Lucy, who'd insisted on staying after Jenna's call from Rosie's "I'm not leaving you with these clowns," she'd said, half joking, half fierce. Ethan slouched in the back seat, silent for once, his hoodie still damp from the storm, his hazel eyes fixed on the motel door like he could see through it to his daughter. Nate killed the engine, the quiet settling heavy, and turned to Jenna, his gray jacket streaked with mud from tackling Dylan Pierce. "It's done," he said, voice low but firm, raindrops clinging to his stubble. "Dylan's in cuffs, cops have him, Voss, the sedan, the works. Noah's wrapping up with the precinct now." "Done?" Jenna echoed, her voice raw, exhaustion tugging at her bones. "You sure this time? No more surprises?" "Cops have hard evidence," he said, leaning back, wiping his face with a sleeve. "Voss's confession, prints on the cup, security tapes from Duffy's Dylan meeting him, handing over cash. Plus the warehouse found a burner phone in his pocket, same number that texted you. He's cooked, Jenna. Uniontown's mine, and he's facing jail." She nodded, slow, the weight of it sinking in but not lifting. Dylan's sneer, "Your kid's a nice touch," still echoed, a knife in her gut. "Good," she said, flat. "But I'm not celebrating till I see him locked up." "Fair," Nate said, glancing at Ethan in the rearview. "Noah's got the precinct on speed dial updates by morning. We're clear for now." Ethan shifted, clearing his throat, his voice rough. "So that's it? Assholes down and I'm still the bad guy?" Jenna turned, glaring at him over the seat. "You don't get a medal for showing up late, Ethan. Dylan's caught, great. Doesn't mean you're off the hook." "I helped," he said, leaning forward, eyes pleading. "I gave you Duffy's, stood with you at that warehouse. I'm not asking for a parade, just a chance to see her." "You'll see her when I say," she snapped, her chest tight. "You left us 6 years, Ethan. Showing up now doesn't erase that." He slumped back, jaw tight, but didn't argue. Nate cut in, voice steady. "Let's cool it," he said. "We're all beat inside. Rest. Figure it out tomorrow." They climbed out, the drizzle cold on Jenna's face as she led the way to the room, Nate and Ethan trailing like mismatched shadows. Lucy opened the door before she could knock, her blonde ponytail swinging, relief flashing in her eyes. "Thank God," she said, pulling Jenna into a quick hug. "You're alive, Ellie's fine, been coloring me a zoo." "Thanks, Luce," Jenna said, her voice thick, stepping inside. Ellie looked up from the bed, a crayon in hand, her face lighting up. "Mommy," she chirped, scrambling over, buns dangling from her grip. "Hey, sweetie," Jenna said, dropping to her knees, hugging her tight, the little girl's warmth melting some of the ice in her chest. "You good?" "Yeah," Ellie said, nodding. "Lucy says I'm a artist." "You are," Jenna said, kissing her forehead, glancing at Lucy with a tired smile. "You sticking around?" "Nah," Lucy said, grabbing her purse. "Gotta crash work tomorrow. Call if you need me, 'kay?" She eyed Ethan, then Nate, muttering, "Good luck with these two," before slipping out into the mist. Nate shut the door, locking it, and sank into the chair by the dresser, his muddy boots leaving faint tracks on the carpet. Ethan hovered near the window, peering through the blinds, restless. Jenna sat on the bed, Ellie nestled against her, coloring again, the room quiet but charged like the air after a lightning strike. "So," Ethan said finally, turning, his voice low. "What now? Pierce is down, you don't need me anymore, right?" "Need's got nothing to do with it," Jenna said, stroking Ellie's hair. "You want to stick around, prove you're not full of shit. But don't think this buys you a free pass." "I'm not," he said, softer, stepping closer. "I know I fucked up, Jen. I was a coward. Seeing that pic online, hearing she was in danger, it hit me. I want to be here, even if you hate me." "I don't hate you," she said, sharp, then softer. "I stopped caring enough to hate you. Ellie's what matters, prove it to her, not me. He nodded, slow, eyes flicking to Ellie, who glanced up, curious but shy. Hi, he said, awkward, crouching a little. I'm a friend of Mommy's. Ellie tilted her head, crayon pausing. You're wet, she said, matter of fact, and Jenna almost laughed, the tension cracking. Yeah, Ethan said, a small smile tugging his lips. Rain's mean today. Nate watched, silent, then stood, grabbing his phone. I'll check with Noah, he said, stepping outside, leaving them in a fragile bubble. Jenna let Ethan sit on the bed's edge, a safe distance, and Ellie handed him a crayon purple, her favorite without a word. Draw a dog, she said, bossy, and Ethan fumbled with it, sketching a lopsided mutt that made her giggle. Jenna's chest ached, watching 6 Years Lost, and here he was, a stranger playing dad. She didn't trust it, not yet, but the fight in her dulled, exhaustion winning. Nate came back 10 minutes later, rain glistening on his jacket. Noah's at the station, he said, shutting the door. Dylan's booked assault, kidnapping conspiracy, the list's long. Voss flipped hard, gave up emails, payments, even a voice memo of Dylan ordering the daycare hit. Cops found the bunny, receipt 2 Pittsburgh Walmart, timestamped last week. It's airtight. Airtight, Jenna said, letting Ellie lean against her, the crayon dog forgotten. He's really gone. Locked up, Nate said, firm. Bail's denied, too much evidence. Uniontown's safe and so are you. She exhaled, a shaky breath, relief seeping in slow. Good, she said, voice thick. I want my life back, our life. You'll get it, he said, sitting again, his eyes soft. Motels covered till tomorrow, then home, or wherever you want. Home, she said, firm, glancing at Ellie, then Ethan. But you, she pointed at Ethan, you're on probation. One step, I decide. Got it, he said, nodding, his hands still on the crayon. I'm not running. Nate's phone buzzed, and he checked it, frowning. Noah, he said, reading. Says they pulled a second phone off Dylan call logs, got a hit to a number in Fairmont. Recent, yesterday. Jenna's stomach twisted, the relief curdling. Who? She said, sitting up, Ellie stirring beside her. Dunno, Nate said, tense. Noah's tracing could be a fluke, could be another player. Cops are on it. Another player? She said, her voice rising. You said it was done. It is for Dylan, he said fast. This might be nothing, loose end. Burner to burner. We'll know soon. Soon, she muttered, rubbing her face, Ellie's warmth grounding her. I'm sick of soon. I know, he said, leaning forward, eyes steady. I'll stay here, tonight. Noah's digging, cops are close. No more surprises, I promise. She nodded, too tired to fight, and glanced at Ethan, who watched silent, his face unreadable. You too, she said. Stay or go. Your call. Stay, he said, quick, settling back. I'm not bailing. The room fell quiet again, just the drizzle outside and Ellie's soft humming as she colored over Ethan's dog. Jenna's eyes drifted to the locked door, the chair still under the knob from last night, and a flicker of peace fought through the doubt. Dylan was down, cuffed, caged, his threats snuffed out. But that call log-nagged, a loose thread in a net she'd thought was tight, and as Nate's phone sat silent, she wondered what shadows still lingered beyond the rain. Monday morning broke over Fairmont with a pale, watery sun, the rain finally gone but leaving the Pinewood Motel's lot a soggy mess of puddles and churned gravel. Jenna woke to the faint hum of the heater and Ellie's soft snores. The little girl sprawled across the bed with buns tucked under her chin, crayons scattered like confetti from last night's zoo masterpiece. The air smelled of stale coffee and damp denim, her jacket still slung over the chair where she'd left it after the warehouse chaos. She rubbed her eyes, exhaustion clinging like a second skin. Dylan Pierce's arrest, a weight lifted but not fully gone, not with that mystery call nagging at her. Nate was already up, standing by the window, peering through the blinds at the quiet lot, his gray jacket swapped for a dry black sweater, phone in hand. Ethan slouched on the other bed, still in his hoodie, awake but silent, his hazel eyes fixed on Ellie with a mix of awe and guilt that twisted Jenna's gut. She slid out of bed, sneakers scuffing the carpet, and grabbed the last of the motel coffee, cold, bitter, but it'd do. Any word? She asked, voice low, nodding at Nate's phone as she leaned against the dresser. Yeah, he said, turning, his face tight. Noah texted cops, traced that second number from Dylan's burner. It's a Fairmont line registered to a prepaid cell. Active yesterday, last ping near Main Street, 10 a.m. Main Street, she said, her stomach sinking, coffee forgotten in her hand. That's a block from Rosie's where I was all day. Exactly, Nate said, grim, pocketing his phone. Noah's digging could be a fluke, someone random, but it's too close. Cops are cross-checking Dylan's contacts, but no name yet. No name, she muttered, glancing at Ellie, then Ethan, her pulse kicking up. So Dylan's locked up, but someone's still here watching? Maybe, Nate said, rubbing his jaw. Could be a loose end, another lackey, someone he paid off. Or what? She pressed, her voice sharp, setting the cup down hard. He hesitated, eyes flicking to Ethan, then back to her. Or it's bigger, someone above Dylan, pulling strings. Pierce Industries isn't just him, family's got deep pockets, deeper grudges. Bigger, she said, her chest tightening, turning to Ethan. You hear this? You show up, and now there's another ghost in Fairmont. Convenient. Huh? Ethan straightened, bristling, hands fisting in his lap. You think I'm in on this? He said, voice rough. I told you I came for Ellie, not some conspiracy. I don't know shit about Pierce beyond that bar. Then explain Main Street, she said, stepping closer, her voice low but fierce. You roll in yesterday, same day this number pings a block from me. You've been in Pittsburgh, Dylan's turf. Tell me that's coincidence. It is, he said, standing, towering over her but keeping his distance. I was at the Red Roof till noon, check the desk, they'll tell ya. I don't have a burner, I've got this. He yanked his cracked phone from his pocket, tossing it on the bed. Look if you want, I ain't hiding. Nate grabbed it, swiping through calls, texts. Nothing recent but a pizza order 2 days back. Clean, he said, tossing it back, but his eyes stayed hard. Doesn't mean much, burners are cheap, Ethan. You could have ditched one. Fuck this, Ethan said, snatching his phone, glaring between them. I'm not the enemy, I helped you nab that bastard. Why'd I stick my neck out if I'm with him? To play me, Jenna said, her voice trembling, stepping back to Ellie's side. Get close, get to her. 6 years, Ethan, you don't get trust for free. He flinched, hands dropping, hurt flashing in his eyes. I know I fucked up, he said softer. I'm not asking for free, I'm asking for a shot. I don't know who's out there, Jen, I swear. She studied him, the gaunt lines of his face, the way he hovered near Ellie like a stray dog afraid to get too close. Swear don't mean shit, she said. But her anger softened, doubt creeping in. Nate, what's Noah doing? Running the number, he said, leaning against the wall. Checking cams near Main Rosie's, the gas station. If it's someone local, we'll catch him. Meantime, we pack, get you and Ellie home. Motel's too exposed. Home, she said, nodding slow, the word a lifeline. Yeah, let's move. They packed fast, Ellie's crayons, buns, Jenna's damp clothes stuffed into the bag. Ethan watching, awkward but quiet. By 9 o'clock, they were rolling, Nate driving, Ellie in the back humming to herself, Ethan beside her staring out the window. The apartment wasn't far, 5 minutes down Main. The brick building squat and familiar, its peeling paint a welcome sight. Jenna unlocked the door, the faint smell of stale coffee hitting her. The coffee table still askew from the break-in. She locked it behind them, sliding the deadbolt, and set Ellie up with her coloring book on the futon. Feels good, she said, dropping the bag, glancing at Nate. But that number, Main Street, I can't shake it. I know, he said, setting his phone on the counter, checking a text. Noah's got something cam from the diner, 10 a.m. yesterday. Grainy, but a guy hoodie tall, near the lot. Could be nothing, could be our ghost. Show me, she said, sharp, and he pulled it up, a blurry still. A figure in a dark hoodie, face shadowed, crossing Main. Her stomach flipped. Ethan Heights, right? Ethan turned, frowning, stepping over. That's not me, he said, peering at the screen. I was at the Red Roof, told ya, check it. Then who? She said, her voice rising, Ellie glancing up from her crayons. Nate, call Noah. Now. He dialed, putting it on speaker, Noah's gruff voice crackling through. Got a match, he said, no preamble. Hoodie guy crossed with a plate from a blue Chevy parked near Rosie's. Registered to a Carl Hensley, Fairmont address. Small-time crook assault, theft, ties to Pittsburgh cruise. Hensley, Jenna said, her blood running cold. Turning to Nate. My landlord, Mr. Hensley. That bastard's been on my ass about rent, knew I was at Rosie's every day. Shit, Nate said, eyes widening. He's got keys your place, the break-in. Noah, where's he now? Address on files, a duplex off Route 19, Noah said. My guy's on route, cops too. If he's our ghost, he's local muscle, Dylan's link. Go, Jenna said, fierce, grabbing her jacket. I'm with you, I want his face. No, Nate said, firm, grabbing her arm. You stay, Ellie needs you. Noah and I handle it. She's right here, Jenna said, pulling free, glancing at Ellie, coloring oblivious. Ethan, you watch her. One move, I'll kill you myself. Got it, Ethan said, nodding fast, settling beside Ellie. I'm not moving, promise. Nate sighed, relenting. Fine, let's roll. Noah, meet us there. They bolted, the drizzle cold as they hit the SUV. Nate peeling out toward Route 19, Jenna's heart pounding. The duplex loomed 10 minutes later, sagging. Brick. A blue Chevy parked crooked in the drive. Noah's truck idled across the street. A cop car pulling up silent. Lights off. Noah stepped out, gun holstered, nodding as they joined him. Hensley's inside, he said, low. Lights on, TV blaring, alone, looks like. Cops'll knock backups close. Let me, Jenna said, fierce, stepping forward. But Nate grabbed her shoulder. No, he said, firm. You're a witness, stay back. We've got this. The cop, a burly guy with a mustache, rapped on the door. Loud, barking. Carl Hensley, Fairmont PD. Open up. A shuffle inside. The TV muted. And the door cracked. Hensley, balding, paunchy, in a stained tank top, eyes darting. What's this? He said, voice whiny, but the cop shoved in, cuffing him fast as he squawked. I didn't do shit. Burner phone says different, Noah said, stepping in, holding up a bagged cell, same model as Dylan's. Call log to Pierce, yesterday, Main Street ping. You're his eyes, Carl. Hensley paled, stammering, I just watched her, that's all. Pierce paid, said it was a job. Watch me? Jenna said, pushing past Nate, fury boiling. You let him in my home, my kid. Easy, Nate said, pulling her back as the cop hauled Hensley out, rain streaking his face. He's done, cops have him. $2,000, Hensley spat, twisting in cuffs. Pierce said, scare her, didn't say snatch, no kid. Save it, the cop growled, shoving him into the car, slamming the door. Noah turned to Jenna, grim. Phone's a match, he said. Texts to Dylan, your schedule, Ellie's daycare. He's small fry, Pierce's puppet. Puppet, Jenna said, shaking, rain soaking her again. Then who's the puppet master? Dylan's locked, someone's still out there. Maybe, Nate said, his voice tight, guiding her back to the SUV. Hensley's a link, cops'll break him. We're closer than ever. She nodded, numb, climbing in as the cop car peeled out, Hensley's curses fading. Back at the apartment, Ethan sat stiff on the futon, Ellie coloring beside him, safe but fragile. He's caught, Nate said, locking the door. Landlord Hensley. Dylan's local eyes? Ethan's jaw dropped, then hardened. Bastard, he muttered, glancing at Ellie. She's okay? Yeah, Jenna said, sinking beside her, pulling her close. But Nate, Hensley said, scare her. Dylan wanted more kidnapping. Who pushed that? Nate's face darkened, phone buzzing. Noah again. Digging, he said, answering quick. Hensley's a start, Pierce Industries runs deep. We're not done. Jenna held Ellie tighter, the sun fading outside, shadows stretching long. Hensley was down, Dylan too, but the net felt loose and something bigger lurked, waiting to strike. Hey, y'all. Hensley's nabbed, but those shadows ain't gone, what a twist. If you're itching to know who's still pulling strings, smash that subscribe button and drop a comment. Ethan clean or Pierce's boss coming? What's your guess? Let's unravel it. Tuesday morning painted Fairmont in a hesitant glow. The sun struggling through a haze of clouds left over from the weekend storms. Jenna woke on the futon in her apartment. Ellie's small form curled against her. Buns wedged between them like a silent guardian. The air smelled faintly of instant coffee and the lavender candle she'd lit last night to chase away the lingering unease of Hensley's arrest. Her back ached from the lumpy mattress, but the familiar creak of the floorboards under her feet as she stood was a comfort home. Finally, after days of motel purgatory. Yet the quiet felt fragile, stretched thin by that unanswered question. Who pushed Dylan past scare her into kidnapping? Nate was up, leaning against the kitchenette counter, sipping coffee from a chipped mug, his black sweater rumpled from a night on the floor with a spare blanket. His phone sat beside him, silent for now, but his gray eyes were restless, scanning the room like he expected trouble to seep through the walls. Ethan sprawled on a chair by the coffee table, still in his hoodie, awake but distant, his gaze fixed on Ellie with an intensity that prickled Jenna's nerves. She'd let him stay begrudgingly after Hensley's takedown, but trust was a threadbare thing, fraying with every unanswered question. "Morning," Nate said, voice low as she shuffled over, grabbing a mug to pour herself the last of the coffee. "Noah's got an update. Hensley's singing. Says Dylan paid him $500 to watch you, report your moves. Swears he didn't know about the daycare hit, just handed over keys for the break-in." "$500, Jenna muttered, the coffee scalding her tongue but not her anger. "Cheap price to sell me out. What about that scare her line? He stick to it?" "Yeah," Nate said, setting his mug down, arms crossing. "Claims Dylan said rattle the waitress, keep her jumpy. Nothing about Ellie, says he'd never sign up for a kid grab. Cops believe him, small fry, not a mastermind." "So Dylan went rogue," she said, glancing at Ellie, still asleep, her curls a soft halo. "Or someone else pushed him, someone bigger." "Maybe," Nate said, rubbing his jaw. "Noah's chasing Pierce Industries. Dylan's dad, Victor, runs the show. Old money, ruthless. If he's in this, Dylan's just the loudmouth up front." "Victor," she echoed, her stomach twisting, turning to Ethan. "You've been in Pittsburgh, ever hear that name?" Ethan shifted, his hands fisting in his pockets, eyes flicking up to meet hers. "Yeah," he said, slow, voice rough. "Victor Pierce, big shot, owns half the north side. Bars talk, guy's a shark. Doesn't get his hands dirty but cuts deep. Didn't connect it till now." "Didn't connect it," Jenna said, sharp, setting her mug down hard, the clink loud in the quiet. "Or didn't want to. You've been cagey since you showed up. Pittsburgh's their turf, Ethan. What's your deal?" "My deal?" he said, standing, his tone rising but hushed for Ellie's sake. "I told you I saw that pic, heard trouble, came running. I don't work for no Pierce, Victor, or Dylan." "Then why's your timing perfect?" she pressed, stepping closer, her voice low and fierce. "Hensley's caught, Dylan's down, and you're still here right when this Victor shit pops up. Spill it, Ethan, now." He exhaled, hard, running a hand through his damp hair, glancing at Nate, then back to her. "All right," he said, quieter, sinking back into the chair. "I've got history more than I said. Sit, Jen, I'll tell you." She hesitated, then perched on the futon's edge, Ellie stirring but settling, Nate leaning in, tense. "Go," she said, her voice steel. Ethan rubbed his face, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. "6 years back, when I left, I didn't just run 'cause I was scared," he said, slow. "I was in deep booze, pills, dumb shit with dumber people. Altoona crew, small-time dealers, running dope from Pittsburgh. I owed em $3,000, couldn't pay. They leaned hard, said they'd come for you if I didn't settle." Jenna's breath caught, her hands fisting in her lap. "Me?" she said, voice trembling. "You left because of that?" "Yeah," he said, meeting her eyes, raw and unguarded. "You were pregnant, I couldn't let em near you. Told em I'd bolt, work it off somewhere else. Took off to Pittsburgh, scrubbed floors, hauled trash, anything to pay it down. Took 2 years, they let me go, but I stayed, kept my head low. Didn't want to drag you into that mess. You didn't tell me," she said, tears prickling, anger surging. "I thought you bailed 'cause you didn't care, left me broke, alone with her." "I cared," he said, fierce, leaning forward. "Too much, couldn't risk you. Thought you'd be better off without me dragging that shit to your door." "Better off?" she said, bitter, wiping her face. "I pawned my mom's necklace for diapers. Ethan worked doubles at Rosie's while Ellie cried at daycare. You don't get to call that better." "I know," he said, voice breaking, hands gripping his knees. "I fucked up, should have told you, should have fought. Seeing that pic, Ellie, you trouble, I had to come back. Clean slate, 2 years sober, I'm not that guy anymore." Nate cut in, voice low, steady. "Pittsburgh, those dealers. Any tie to Pierce? Ethan frowned, thinking, then nodded slow. Maybe heard whispers back then. Crew worked for a bigger fish, someone up north, moving cash, not just dope. Could have been Victor didn't care enough to ask. Could have, Jenna said, her voice trembling, standing again. So you're tied to this however deep and didn't say shit till now? I didn't know, he said, standing 2 hands up. I was a grunt, owed money, ran errands. Pierce was a name, not my boss, I swear, Jen. Swear don't cut it, she said, stepping back, her chest heaving. Nate, what's this mean? Victor's behind Dylan, and Ethan's past links up? Means we dig, Nate said, grabbing his phone, dialing fast. Noah, Ethan's got history, Pittsburgh crew, possible Pierce tie. Run it, Victor's reach, old debts. Now, Noah's voice crackled through, gruff. On it, Victor's got fingers in everything up here. Dealers, real estate, muscle. If Ethan's crew touched his cash, he'd know, might have kept tabs. Tabs, Jenna said, her stomach dropping, turning to Ethan. So Victor knew you knew me. Ellie all this time? No, Ethan said, desperate. I was nothing, a debtor, not a name. If he knew, why wait till now? 'Cause I'm with Nate, she said, realization hitting cold. Uniontown deal, Dylan's play, Victor's game. You're the spark, your past lit this fire. Jesus, Ethan muttered, sinking back, face pale. I wouldn't. Save it, she said, sharp, turning to Nate. What's next? Victor's out there, Hensley, Dylan, just pawns? Noah's on Victor, Nate said, hanging up. Cops have Dylan's burner logs, might trace up. We stay put here, safe till we know. Ethan, you're not off the hook. Stick close, no moves. Fine, Ethan said, nodding, eyes on Ellie, who stirred awake, blinking up. Mommy? She said, yawning, crayon rolling off the futon. Who's loud? Just us, sweetie, Jenna said, forcing a smile, scooping her up, her warmth a shield. Hungry? Yeah, Ellie said, nodding, and Jenna carried her to the kitchenette, digging out bread for toast, her hands shaking. Nate watched, tense, Ethan hovering, the room thick with unspoken stakes. Her phone buzzed a text from Lucy. You good? Heard cops nabbed Hensley, WTF? She tapped back, yeah, long story, call later, setting it down as Nate's buzzed to Noah again. Victor's condo empty, Nate said, reading fast. Cops hit it, cleaned out, no sign. Noah's guy says he's got a private jet. Filed a flight plan last night, Vegas. Vegas, Jenna said, toast forgotten, turning with Ellie in her arms. He's running? We're hiding, Nate said, grim. Dylan's fall spooked him, means he's the brain, not the muscle. We've got leverage, cops, logs, but he's slippery. So he's gone, she said, her voice trembling, hugging Ellie tighter. But he knows us, me, Ellie, Ethan's past. We're not safe. We are, Nate said, stepping closer, voice firm. Here, with me, Noah's team, cops on alert. Victor's running, he's not striking now. Now, she echoed, bitter, glancing at Ethan, his face a mask of guilt. But he's out there and he's got a long memory. Ethan stood, slow, hands out. I'll fix this, he said, quiet. Whatever it takes, Victor. The past I'll dig. I'll fight. For her. Jenna stared at him, Ellie's weight grounding her. The sun weak outside. Victor was a shadow, retreating but not gone. And Ethan's secret had cracked open a door she couldn't close. The fight wasn't over, it was shifting, deeper, darker. And as Nate's phone sat silent, she felt the net tighten. Not around their enemies, but around them. Wednesday morning draped Fairmont in a cold, thin mist, the kind that clung to your skin and blurred the edges of the world. Jenna stood in her apartment's kitchenette, pouring instant coffee into a chipped mug, the steam curling up as Ellie's crayons scratched across a coloring book on the futon. The little girl hummed a tune, oblivious to the tension coiled tight in the room. Nate pacing by the window, phone pressed to his ear. Ethan slouched on a chair, his hoodie swapped for a borrowed flannel from Nate, his hazel eyes darting between Ellie and the locked door. Victor Pierce's shadow loomed larger since yesterday's revelation, Ethan's past. The jet to Vegas, the unanswered question of who'd pushed Dylan to cross that line. Noah's got a lock, Nate said, hanging up, his voice cutting through the quiet as he turned to Jenna. his black sweater streaked with lint from another night on the floor. Victor didn't fly jets a decoy. Cops hit the airstrip empty hangar. Noah's guy tracked a rental car black Escalade, rented under a Pierce Shell Corp, last seen an hour ago, heading east on 79. Fairmont's in his path. Fairmont, Jenna said, her mug trembling in her hands, coffee sloshing over the rim. He's coming here? After all this? Looks like, Nate said, grim, stepping closer. Dylan's locked, Hensley 2 Victors losing grip. Noah thinks he's desperate, cleaning up loose ends before he bolts for real. Loose ends, she said, her voice shaking, setting the mug down hard. That's us, me, Ellie. Ethan's past gave him the map right to us. Ethan stood, fast, his chair scraping the floor. I didn't give him shit, he said, voice rough but low, glancing at Ellie. I was a nobody to those cruise Victors, got bigger fish than me. Then why's he here? She snapped, stepping toward him, her chest tight. Dylan's down, Victor could run, hide. Why come back? Uniontown, Nate said, cutting in, his tone steady but dark. Deals still live, millions on the line. I've got the upper hand now, but if he takes me out or he thinks he can flip it. Scare me off, or worse. Worse, Jenna said, her stomach dropping, turning to Ellie, who looked up, crayon pausing. Mommy? She said, tilting her head. It's okay, sweetie, Jenna said, forcing a smile, crossing to kneel beside her. Keep coloring, Mommy's just talking. She brushed a curl from Ellie's face, then stood, glaring at Nate. He's not getting near her, I don't care what it takes. He won't, Nate said, fierce, grabbing his phone again. Noah's 10 minutes out, bringing backup, ex-cops. Cops here are on alert, Victor's wanted, no bail. We end this today. How? Ethan said, stepping forward, hands fisting. He's got cash, muscle jet or not, he's not strolling in alone. We bait him, Nate said, eyes narrowing. Noah's got a bead Escalades circling the Mill District old steel site. I'm the target, he wants me gone. I go, draw him out, cops, and Noah closed the net. No, Jenna said, sharp, grabbing his arm. You're not walking into that, not after everything. I'm not dying, he said, covering her hand with his voice firm. Noah's team's tight, cops are 3 minutes behind. Victor's desperate, not dumb, he'll bite, but we've got the teeth. And me? Ethan said, voice low, stepping closer. I'm not sitting, let me help. I owe her that. Jenna turned, studying him, gaunt, tense, but steady. You owe her more than that, she said, quiet. But fine, prove it. Deal, Nate said, nodding. You're with me, back up, eyes open. Jenna, you and Ellie stay here, lock it down. Noah's guys outside gray Tacoma, watching. No, she said, fierce, shaking her head. I'm not hiding, I'm in this. Lucy's 5 minutes away, she takes Ellie. I go with you. Jenna, Nate started, but she cut him off. He came for my kid, she said, her voice breaking but steel underneath. I see his face, I end this with you. He exhaled hard, then nodded. All right, call Lucy. We move fast. She dialed, Lucy picking up quick. Girl, you okay? Her voice crackled, worried. Need you, Jenna said, fast. Ellie now. Trouble's back. On it, Lucy said, no questions, and hung up. 5 minutes later, her Corolla screeched in, Lucy bursting through the door, ponytail swinging. Come on, kiddo, she said, scooping Ellie up with her backpack, buns dangling. Aunt Lucy's got a movie day planned. Mommy? Ellie said, clinging, eyes wide. I'll be back soon, Jenna said, kissing her forehead, her throat tight. Be good. Okay? Lucy nodded, fierce, and bolted, the Corolla peeling out. Jenna locked the door, turning to Nate and Ethan, her hands shaking but resolve solid. Let's go. They rolled in Nate's SUV, the Mill District looming ahead, a rusted graveyard of steel beams and crumbling brick, the air thick with damp and decay. Noah waited by a chain-link fence, his truck parked crooked, 2 guys in flannel, ex-cops, burly and quiet, flanking him, guns holstered but ready. Escalades inside, Noah said, nodding at the warehouse, its windows dark. Victor's got 2 driver, muscle. Cops are staging a block back, silent till we say. Plan? Jenna asked, her voice steady, gripping the flashlight Nate handed her. I walk in, Nate said, pulling a mic from Noah's kit, clipping it under his sweater. Talk, get him on tape. You and Ethan hang back, watch the exits. Noah's team moves on my signal, cops roll when he's pinned. Got it? Ethan said, cracking his knuckles, eyes hard. Let's bury this bastard. They split, Nate striding toward the warehouse door, Jenna and Ethan slipping along the side, crouching by a rusted barrel, the Escalade's gleam visible through a cracked window. Her heart pounded, the flashlight heavy in her hand, Ethan's breath quiet beside her. Inside, Nate's voice echoed, mic crackling through Noah's earpiece nearby. Victor Pierce, game's up. Dylan's done, Hensley too. Walk away. A laugh low, cold cut through, Victor's voice smooth as oil. Sullivan, persistent little shit. Uniontown's mine, you're the loose end. Loose? Nate said, sharp. Cops have your son, your phone's burner logs, Vegas jets a bust. Your cook talk or rot. Footsteps, Victor stepping into view, tall, silver-haired, in a tailored coat, flanked by a beefy guy in a leather jacket, gun loose in his hand. Rot, he said, smirking. I don't rot, I win. Your waitress and her brat, nice touch, but leverage cuts both ways. Jenna's blood boiled, her grip tightening, but Ethan grabbed her arm, whispering, wait, Nate's got him. You sent Dylan after a kid, Nate said, voice icy, stepping closer. That's your win? Cops are outside, talk or they drag you. Victor's smirk faltered, eyes darting. Then he nodded at leather jacket. End it, he said, and the guy raised his gun. Nate dove, Noah's shout crackling now. Noah's team burst in, guns drawn. Drop it, echoing as leather jacket fired, missed, bullet pinging steel. Jenna bolted, flashlight swinging, Ethan charging beside her, tackling the driver as he lunged from the Escalade. Victor spun, reaching for a pistol, but Nate slammed him down, knee on his back, snarling, you're done. Cops flooded in, lights flashing red and blue through the mist, cuffing Victor hard as he swore, leather jacket and the driver pinned beside him. Jenna stood, panting, flashlight trembling, Ethan wiping blood from a split lip, grinning grim despite it. Got him, he said, breathless. Yeah, Nate said, standing, Victor writhing under cop boots. Mike caught it, all of it. Conspiracy, assault, he's buried. Jenna stepped closer, staring down at Victor, his silver hair mud-streaked, eyes blazing hate. My kid, she said, voice shaking with rage. You came for her, you lose. He smirked, weak but venomous. Lose? I've got reach, cuffs don't stop that. Cuffs start it, Noah said, looming over, bagging Victor's gun. Feds are next, Pierce Industries crumbles. They dragged him out, the Escalade cordoned off, cops swarming as Nate pulled Jenna aside, his hand on her shoulder. It's over, he said, voice soft, mist clinging to his face. He's gone, really gone. Over, she said, trembling, glancing at Ethan, then back. He's got reach, he said it. What's that mean? Bluff, Nate said, firm? Or old ties, feds'll dig. We're safe, Ellie's safe. She nodded, slow, relief seeping in, Ethan stepping up, wiping his hands on his flannel. I'm staying, he said, quiet. For her however you want it. Jenna looked at him, bruised, steady, and exhaled, the fight draining out. We'll see, she said, soft, turning to Nate. Home now. They drove back, the mill fading in the mist, Ellie waiting with Lucy, crayons ready. Victor was down, net tight, threat snuffed, but his words lingered, a whisper of something deeper, and as the apartment door locked behind them, Jenna held Ellie close, wondering if the shadows were truly gone. Hey, y'all. Victor's down, epic showdown, right? But that reach line's got me side-eyeing. If you're pumped from this and sniffing more trouble, smash that subscribe button and drop a comment. Ethan redeemed or still shady? What's your vibe? Let's hash it out.